Evening, everybody. It's going to get a little weird for the schedule for the next little while, I think. But let me get set up. I do still need to get my tablet, and then we'll be ready to go. Just one second. Okay. Um, had a little trouble with just getting myself organized. So, first day at the new job today. That was, I think, for the most part, a good thing, although I do sometimes worry I've gotten myself in over my head. Although I think that's probably going to be true just in general. I think the real question is, how I do when it actually comes time to deliver some work, and I suspect I'll be able to start that tomorrow morning. Books are the memory which does not die, inscribed in 5 languages over the gate of Hush House. Go quietly. Book of Hours is a forgiving sort of game. If you're worried you might be stuck, there's usually another way. But just because of the commute, I did wind up getting... So I went to bed sort of at a time when I would get a full night's sleep, but as is probably going to be the case, new job, nerves rattling, and then also it's just an earlier bedtime and an earlier start than I'm used to. In practice, that meant that I didn't get a whole lot of, I just didn't get as much rest as I wanted. And I'm actually starting later than I wanted because the window in which I can kind of get everything done on the Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays is actually quite narrow. What realistically happens is the way that I've blocked out streaming, I need to start on time, and I basically go to bed the second I stop streaming. And of course, the drawback here is that the more I let that end time sort of creep forward, the more likely it is that I'm going to sort of disrupt the schedule. And that, of course, means either not enough sleep, which means work suffers, but also the stream suffers, as I'm sure some of you have noticed over the past couple of streams and may notice on this one. But it also probably starts a little bit of a negative trend. So I do still want to try and do the full time. Like this shift isn't going to be too terrible, and I don't like the idea of doing a shorter broadcast without sort of advanced notice. One of the reasons I feel like I can do this is that I'm just so kind of wiped out from the day, and to be honest with you, I didn't really miss out on that much sleep, but I sure feel like I did. So I suspect once all is said and done, I'm probably just going to crawl into bed and, well, let's say I suspect there will not be any problems with me getting enough sleep tonight. But again, just a heads up, things are a little weird right now in terms of just what I can do, or like just in terms of like the time that I have to do things, and specifically it is the streaming days which are creating a little bit of awkwardness there. Although I suspect what is going to happen moving forward, there's going to be a bit more. There's going to be a little bit more time to accommodate a later start. So it sounds like in the grand scheme of things, I'm going to be able to... Hey, Ellen Ripley, good to see you. I think probably what might happen is that I will be able to sort of start my day at work from home, as long as there is work from home to do. And then, I can get in a little bit later. They seem to be pretty accommodating with that. I think they care that I am doing the work and that I'm number one, hitting the targets, but working my 7.5, which that's never been a problem. Doing the work obviously is an open question because I feel, oh God, did I just sign myself up for something I'm not equipped for? But that aside. I'm feeling I'm feeling like there is a way forward with the stream. It's just going to be a bit weird for this week. But Dylan Ripley, it's very good to see you. Let's jump in. I know I've talked to you about where I would like to go with the stream overall, so I'm feeling a little self-conscious about the time that I'm taking to do the batch of things that I'm doing right now. But hey, we've got Vesper Fortune in here as well. Very good to see you too. I did check out what was it? Emergency. It was an emergency hotline. I wrote it down. Hang on, let me see if I've got it on this notebook. Home Safety Hotline, thank you. Yes, I checked that out, so it seemed to be a little bit of a horror game. Not a horror game. Sorry, calling it a horror game probably is underselling it, but I think I got a bit of an idea in terms of why you recommended it. Oh, there it is. Didn't pick it up yet, but I am intrigued. I think that's probably a recommendation, incidentally, that could extend to the rest of the chat as well. It seems to be the sort of thing that the kids are into these days. So, Ellen Ripley is very glad that I took his advice. Took their advice. I need to be a little bit better. I always default with everyone whenever I say. Well, basically, whenever it comes down to the pronouns, this has actually burned me a couple of times because of broadcasters who I have seen, and they're always and they're not a him, even though I say he. So I'm really trying to reverse that trend to just automatically assign male to everyone on the internet, but it is a very, very difficult reflex to just. Anyways, sorry. That is going to be a general rule I try to apply unless people say they want otherwise. But I need to catch myself each time I say that. But especially for those of you that are in fact he's and who's this. It's always a little funny to say it for someone like Ellen Ripley, because it would seem natural to say, to say something. Anyways, yeah. It's a bad habit. Like, again, I only very rarely catch myself in the moment, and it's usually only like 10 minutes after the fact when I'm like, oh yeah, I said I was going to try and do that. But again, it's a like, obviously it's a default reaction, just because it's, everybody's text on a big long screen for me. But anyway. And Nearly Logical, good to see you too. I'm sure I sound a little bit like I'm worn out from the day, but I'm not going to let that stop me. All right, now I don't know if I had any immediate plans for the day, but the one thing that I do know I was doing was I was trying to limit the explorations to sort of these groups of 3. So, for instance, today I think we are trying to do sand stories, purifications, and exaltations, and glass blowing and vessel crafting. And that doesn't mean that we are not interested in any of the other skills. It's just that I want to move forward. Incidentally, there's quite a few more bodies in here than I thought at the start. So I realize this is still something of a thin shout out, but Vesper Fortune VT is a VTuber, recommender of many good games. Had been playing Persona recently, but I don't believe that was the most recent thing that you were playing. But I had a lot of, I still have a lot of fun hanging out in their broadcast. And actually particular. I don't know why I'm really highlighting the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer one, but I think it was just, well, number one, Vesper's always very complimentary whenever describing my broadcast, so that's always a nice plus. I think that was maybe the first time that I sort of noticed it. But on top of that, it was just kind of a chance. I think when you're sort of riffing off of an old movie, it's always fun to just sort of see a little bit of the personality that comes out. But I have actually been slowly filing a few games that Vesper's been playing onto my to play list. And then on top of that, I'm getting recommendations like the Home Safety Hotline. So it's kind of a twofold recommendation there, I suppose. All right. So, yeah, so like I said, there's no real reason for me to... So, like, in theory here, right, if I was playing this on my own, probably the more... Nice. Okay. Looking forward to it. So under normal circumstances, the most sensible thing for me to do right now would basically be to sort of pause and work through all of these different recipes that I'm currently pursuing. The problem with this approach would be that it would mean that there would probably be multiple streams where I'm sort of sitting, not progressing the day, despite the fact that we are ready to commit a history and we're waiting for Numa, and that this idea of investigating recipes is a thing for me to do in between, committing my history or writing down my history and actually committing it, making the recommendation to the hours. So I figured the way that I would do this is that I have knocked quite a few entries off this list already. Yesterday we got, what was it, 6 different entries. But certainly I want to kind of continue down this road. I suppose the other thing that I can do in a pinch, I'm noticing that I don't have an earthquake name yet, so I should be able to turn that into... I should be able to turn the old moment into the earthquake name. In fact... Alright, we're already bringing in Reverend Timothy. Let's get that done now. I wonder if I can get away doing this with the Pale Desk. So I think the mistake I made last time was to try and use Horns and Ivories, which, as you'll see, doesn't have an earthquake name, so I think it's Hill and Hollow that I want. Yeah, so then I need 13 scale. Now the tricky part here is that I don't actually have enough. I would either have to add a relevant ink, I would need one other source. Okay, well that's fine, because it's not that hard for me to get scale. I can do that with fear. So we'll read Exorcism for Girls, or Miladies, as I like to call them. All right, let's do Exorcism for Girls. And if I can, it would be nice to make another old moment. And I believe we need a memory for that, but we might be able to get away. I think it was the Disciplines of the Scar. So I would need one more lantern, but I can make that. And we don't have too much of a need for the gale here, right? We already have the ability to get a storm, so I'm happy enough to just leave that aside. I've never actually. This is one thing. Boys at the sleepover, let's play Silent Hill and stay up late. Girls at the sleepover, we have to exercise Gina. I don't recall if you have actually read, because I know you're quite fond of Thyrza Blake, Vesper, so I don't know if you've read Exorcism for Girls, but it is definitely a very Thyrza Blake kind of book. So what I'm thinking here We don't need to worry too much about keeping the gale again because I can make a storm, which is just a super gale, with the swaddled thunder. But this will also take me 90 seconds as opposed to the 60 seconds to generate the memory that I need for the earthquake name. So I figure we can start making the old moment right away. And then if I can, I figure I'll make a little bit of money at the Sweet Bones, and we can just go back to sort of doing the, do one and then renew, do one, then renew. So I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There is no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. Rector's assistants, Reverend Timothy, Rector of Brandkrug, ordained by the Church of the Unconquered Sun, a learned man blessed in the tally, the gate, and the lights. Reverend Timothy is always, always happy to chat. Okay. So yeah, the first little bit. So I was actually going to start messing around with some of the recipes right away. I'm holding off on that. One, so I can get a couple of memories. Number two, just so I can have the earthquake name. It gives me a little more flexibility. But honestly, at some point later in the day, we'll try and do what we can with the sand stories, purifications, exaltations. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the one thing that I do want to start doing now is coming up with a list of things that are normal inputs to those kinds of aspects. What that'll basically do is, in the worst case scenario, once I've got everything written down, that'll give me sort of an inventory of inputs that I haven't tried. I've got sort of a spreadsheet of things that I've tried within certain aspects. There are a couple of things that I've done which have made those spreadsheets slightly corrupted, but I think I can get the majority of the work that I need done. But the main focus for that is just to sort of eliminate any of the obvious things. So like the fact that we got the honey, right? The cuckoo honey. That's a really good example of something which is just, it doesn't require a whole lot of thought, but being able to figure that out sort of knocks a few entries off of the list. And if we can get another one of those for, any of the skills, well, that's going to propagate to the rest of the list. So for something like Inks of Power, which is lower on the list, I'm not expecting to crack that thing wide open, because we don't really know what would be the off aspect, crafting for that. Well, we know a couple, but we don't know the big one that we're pursuing. But for something like, I don't know, it's always hard to say this stuff in advance, but let's suppose it's like some of those other lantern ones where we've had multiple different lantern recipes available in the same skill. That's the sort of thing that I want to eliminate, and try to put in for the rest of for the different skills. Those are the things that are easy to knock off the list. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. So let me enjoy some tea, and then we can read the contents of Exorcism for Girls. All right, it's simple but forceful techniques for rousting unbefitting spirits, written in straightforward and colorful language. Blake seems uncertain at points whether the techniques are intended for use by or on girls. She clearly regards children as a nuisance. There's advice on the shapeless wood things known as raw prophets is typically practical. 1. Discourage them with buckets of water as close as possible to freezing, and with smoke of dried lemongrass. 2. Under no circumstances kiss them or receive kisses from them. And 3. An effective formula is provided for laundering clothes stained with prophet slime. Look at all you cool people having sleepovers. We couldn't do this at the pale desk now. We'll have to do this at an altar that takes scale. I keep getting this wrong. It's the horned axe that has the scale. Alright, this should be enough. There we go. Discern a potency of scale. So that's 2 minutes that we're going to wait. And then the old moment should sort itself out in about 30 seconds. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. It is spring, and the landlady has served me a slice of her stargazy pie, with the pilchard heads poking cheekily through the hot crust. So part of what I'm trying to do here is have a few elements of the soul left to play around with if the skills require it. I suppose the one exception here is I have used my powerful health to make the earthquake name, but in that case, that I feel like that is justified. With keeper level scale, not lantern, an old moment can lead to an earthquake name. So this is one that we're going to have to renew each evening. I don't think that's going to be too taxing, but it's one that I'm going to need to sort of consciously remember because I'm definitely going to be in stupid mode for the next 2.5 hours or so. I don't need to listen to everything Reverend Timothy says. He doesn't even really expect me to, but I'm often glad when I do. Pretty sure I just spilled tea on my keyboard, but it's dark enough that I can't see where I spilled it on the keyboard, so I'm just hoping it's not going to start typing random letters at some point. Better now. So it's not like we need the money, but it's also, we just don't have a whole lot to do with the whist at the moment, so let's take a look at... So 50 seconds I think will be fine. I'll be able to get the earthquake name, and then we'll start working on the... Do you have a backup keyboard? I do not, actually. That would be a bit of a problem if that happened. But like, it's not a major spill. I've had... This keyboard's actually survived one tea spill, although usually whenever I do spill a meaningful quantity, I'm able to like flip it upside down and like, you know, just get everything dealt with. When I was growing up, there definitely was a rather unfortunate incident involving a can of pop, and I definitely know what it is like to see a computer or a computer keyboard not operate as specified. So, I suppose if I do lose the keyboard, I mean, it probably wouldn't be a problem for Book of Hours because you can play this game with mouse only. Oh, actually, this is a worthwhile notification. I don't know if there was an official community announcement for it, but on the Reddit, one of the members of Weather Factory has confirmed that there will be a, I believe it was iOS, or, well, mobile port. There might have been a suggestion that it was, you know, like Cultist Simulator, which would imply that there would be a Switch port as well, but the last thing I want to do is sort of announce stuff that I'm not aware of. But I believe in this case, in a separate conversation, like as part of a reply, there was sort of a verification that yes, there is a port in the works. Obviously with no official announcement date, and again, I suspect that probably when they are ready to talk about it, they will they'll make a full announcement of it. So don't like make a schedule around it. But I did notice a confirmation. I think I was meaning to mention that on another one because I know there were some people asking, and it seems like in this case it's a when, not an if. But again, please do not use that to then turn around and ask Weather Factory where is that thing that they promised. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. All right, we'll recover the whist again, but I think now is probably not a bad time for me to put the... Let's do my homework. Okay, sand stories. So there's two... I'll actually kind of explain the algorithm that I'm applying for learning these things. It'd be nice if I had a rose and moon keyboard, but I don't think there is one. So there's rose here. There's rose here, but it's rose and moth. Yeah. Maybe the desk isn't the best choice anyway. Okay, we're going to start with the rose side of the equation. Please do not quote me on my already questionable gaming journalism articles. Actually, yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. I have a couple of essays that I was working on that I don't know, like I think they're onto something, but I realize that may not be a universally held view. So I've put those on. I knew it. I'm editing them. I don't really like the idea of not publishing something because I think it will be unpopular, but it's funny you mention it just because a couple of the ones were about sort of how game developers get paid. And yeah, I don't know, like every once in a while I do get nasty word. Like I think I talked about this before, like I think one of the reasons why I'm getting a little bit more, meh, you can't write that responses are because I'm writing shorter things. But I don't want that to be, oh, I should have, well, I can still write this down, but yeah, like I don't like to be deliberately contrarian, but I do also like to write something that I think is, true, but also not as, it's something that's maybe not being considered as much as it should be. But yeah, in any case, one of the essays I've debated on writing, and I don't always feel, oh, I forgot. I also have a Wormwood Dream that I want to make at some point. Maybe that's a good one for me to try tonight before I wrap everything up. Anyways, yeah, I've been debating on writing, like, why I write such objectionable things. But I also try not to write too many articles just about me. So, I don't know. We'll see it. Anyways, I'm sure that's not what you meant by that Vesper Fortune, but it's kind of funny because lately I'm happy for the extra activity, but yeah, no, for sure. Okay, here's the thing that actually bugs me a bit about Kotaku. Like, the thing is that it's nice that there are large outfits that cover gaming, because I recognize that is a very difficult business. You can see that by the number of sort of shops that are closing. But the thing is that I'm not entirely sure a lot of these outfits are doing enough to sort of explain why they're valuable. Because I have definitely seen a lot of Kotaku articles that are unnecessarily confrontational with the game developers that they're covering. So, like, I'm thinking, what is it, Greg Schoenfeld, the guy who he worked, or I think he might have founded Visceral. He's definitely a senior person at Visceral, so with Dead Space, and then Sledgehammer Games, so obviously major contributor to Call of Duty, and then I believe at the time he was working at Crafty on the Callisto protocol. Whether or not you like the games, Everything that I heard after that article came out was that this is a very hardworking and quite a nice person. And this article was definitely sort of, oh, they get to have a holiday where they get to play with guns or something like that. Oh, I'm not familiar with the writer. Anyways, yeah, no, it's like, so like the thing with it is like I kind of get the brand. Like I get the idea of like being sort of irreverent. I mean, I guess it's kind of like, like if I say Vice for gaming, I guess that's like Waypoint. But like, like obviously there are going to be outfits that have a particular voice, and maybe that voice isn't for me. But the thing is that it very often strikes me as this needlessly confrontational approach, which I find very off-putting, and I'm not entirely sure is more informative. So like another example, and like, okay, so the thing that is gonna just this is what drives me nuts about this kind of coverage, is that I don't feel like I should be defending these people, save for the kinds of nonsense that I see being put against them. So when you've got, was it Gina Haspel? Anyways, like, so this is one of the Activision Blizzard executives, and like every single Kotaku article would be calling her the torture apologist. And like, I think I wrote an article on this actually, and I was just sort of like, okay, so look, Call of Duty, not Call of Duty, Activision Blizzard has a lot of former Republicans that work there, right? That's probably in line with Bobby Kotick's, politics. If nothing else, things like the Call of Duty endowment certainly are more in line with what you would consider to be sort of traditional Republican values. And the fact of the matter is, this is a very large and profitable company that, people who are in public service, if they're looking to go into the private sector, it's the sort of job that you would normally see someone take. The fact that it's related to gaming is, the reason why we're looking at this. But like, the thing that I'm kind of uncomfortable with, so number one, like the calling her the torture apologist, I feel is, I feel there's probably a little bit more that you can say. But the big thing that bugged me was this idea that, the real issue here seemed to be that these were people, like, it was never this person's really bad because of this memo they wrote. I'm talking about an Activision Blizzard specific memo that they wrote. And you absolutely can condemn them for some of the things that they did at Activision Blizzard. The thrust of the argument against them was always they were a figure in the Bush administration, and therefore they're bad. And, again, I'm not an American, so I don't have... I think everybody kind of knows what my stance on U.S. politics would be if I could vote there. But, like, to a certain extent, it's just like, it's none of my business. I really shouldn't be telling people, how tolerant they should be. But I guess the biggest thing that I sort of look at is there is a big problem of trying to make sure that you can attract and retain talent in the civil service. And I would propose that regardless of what party is forming the government, there are some things that you just kind of want to be done correctly. And it's a big problem if you can't attract people to let these things get done correctly. So, like, for instance, the census, right? So the census seems to get done when it's, George W. Bush or, or Bill Clinton, or, I mean, presumably, I'm trying to remember, I can't remember how often the census gets done. It's an annual thing in the States, right? Now I'm curious, so I'm going to look this up. No, it couldn't be annual. 2020 census. Every 10 years. Yeah, that's definitely not an annual thing. Okay. So yeah, no, this is the thing that weirded me out, because I was like, wait a minute, I can't remember I can't remember if every president would have a census, and I'm like, definitely not on a 10-year. Anyways, you get the idea, right? Like, the preparation for a census can occur under one administration and be conducted under another. And being able to have an effective public service that is able to do that sort of stuff, that is actually the stuff that we associate with a properly functioning government, I think is important. And so creating this idea that because someone served an administration under, an unpopular government, and I am not trying to suggest here that everyone should look on the bright side of, the Bush years or something, Bush 2 years. But I do think that there is a bit of a difference between saying, this person is tainted forever by this, by this public service that they've done, without pointing to a specific instance where that service is done. And again, the Gina Haspel one's a little bit of a tough one, because I can see why some people would have a problem with some of the things that she did at the CIA. But the thing is that I would rather it be, focusing on this thing they did at the company that is bad, as opposed to, well, basically anybody who served in a Republican administration is never going to get favorable coverage from this outfit. Because again, like, my view is that if you want to attract someone into the public service, it shouldn't be like when there's a Republican administration, everyone goes and tries to find another job because they really don't want to have to put up with the criticism they're going to get for what they don't have control over. And clearly, usually at the time you have an unpopular government, or, the type of people you disagree with, that's probably the time you want competent people making sure that everything is running correctly in there. I just think it's the wrong set of incentives. And it's, in the end, I just don't really see how some of that stuff is relevant to the game's coverage. So again, right, it's not that I didn't, like, Brian Bellato, I think, was the other figure in there. It's not like I thought what he put in his memo was at all okay, but it's just one of these things where I keep noticing that Kotaku really makes a big deal about their connection to various political figures, when it's actually sufficient to just use their words, to say this was not a good thing that they did. And then the last thing that I kind of did was I contrasted it to the Wall Street Journal's coverage. And the Wall Street Journal, for the topics that I checked, actually covered more, like, so I knew more about the subject. It gave me more background and context in terms of what decision was made and why. In fewer words than the Kotaku equivalent. So I feel kind of bad for picking on Kotaku, but I mean, this is essentially a problem of their own creation. But I guess the biggest thing is, right, like, when you have a large outfit like that, the expectation here is that you have a degree of specialization. Like, you have people who are, this is their job. This is the thing that they are expected to, to be an expert on. And in the end, if they're really not writing anything beyond what you would see inside of any just sort of random blogger, someone like me, it does make me wonder, like, why does this outfit have the access or the, sort of the position that it does? And I mean, obviously in the case of Kotaku, I think it's fair to say that position, its status has been somewhat eroded. Yeah, exactly. You said that much better than I did, Vesper. So, I don't know. It is interesting. So I think Axios might have closed its gaming coverage. But it is interesting that Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal are doing a good job covering it. I mean, maybe it's a reflection of the maturity of the industry in the sense that, it's business publications that are actually doing some of the better coverage. But on the other hand, right, you have trade publications like Variety for movies. So, I suppose you kind of wonder in terms of gaming press. Well, then again, I mean, Variety has a really long history, so maybe there's something there. Anyways, there's no point to this rant, just... I'm going to bring up my list for the moon now. Sorry, I'm really feeling the effects of black. I might actually, it's not caffeinated tea that I'm drinking, but I might boil some more water and give myself a second cup, because one, this is really tasty, but number two, sometimes it's just nice to have something hot to sip on while I talk. But let me just take a sip of this and get my spreadsheet up, and then I can recalibrate, because I was going to explain sort of the algorithm I'm applying to learn the different recipes. Okay, so first thing I've noticed here is that I don't actually have a sheet for Rose investigation, so it's good I checked this. Yeah, so basically what I'm doing here, the only entries that I have for, the only entries that I really have for actually, I can put a mark in here, so I'm going to try one more for completeness. But basically I've put in two columns here, one for light. This produces the ichor auroral, and then one for ichor auroral to produce porphyrine. And then what I'm basically going to do is there will be columns for things that I know are created from other rose skills. And then the next step would be to see what happens when I... as we add more skills, we add those columns for those ones. But also, I can keep records of the things that I've already attempted. So, for instance, I'm not expecting any miracles with the salt sign, but I figure I can at least put that down, because normally I have had... oh, tell me I have a salt sign still. That's funny if I've used all of them up. I didn't think... I always kept saying how I didn't really use them, but then I quote-unquote didn't use them to a point that apparently I don't have any on the board anymore. Okay. Vesper says, I'll start to worry when Vogue does video game coverage outside of how video game characters have inspired fashion. Ellen says, I was making lunch while you were talking about Kotaku. Your partner is also a video game journalist, and there are lots of feeling regarding Kotaku in this house. Obviously, all positive ones, and I apologize for besmirching the reputation of that fine outfit. Information entropy is a topic you care deeply about. I could talk forever on how the economics, news cycle, blogs, and how AI come together to make a pretty nasty mix from the smallest blog to the largest media empire. And thank you, Vesper. I mean, I'm not feeling like, God's gift to discourse right now. I am probably going to... I know it's not even been an hour, but I am probably going to take a little bit just to refill my tea. But I don't know. It's yeah. it's like there is a certain way of covering some of this stuff which takes, like, it kind of has this premise that there was somehow some sort of golden age that we've sort of passed, like, you know, when it comes to the tone of political discourse or something like that. And I'm like, there probably is a degree of nastiness present that maybe wasn't, if it wasn't there, it was at least, you know, far enough back in history that we could, you know, could be forgiven for, you know, feeling like we're in a particularly unique time. But I mean, I think it's sufficient to just sort of say, you know, I really wish people could actually, like, talk to each other as opposed to this, like, stuff that wouldn't, like, I have actually had to deal with college debate, and some of it was really, really wretched. Obviously, you know, this was my first exposure to a lot of the sort of stuff that you see certain parts of Twitter getting really really worked up about, and why, you know, why higher education should be abolished or something like that. You know, again, I'm not going to pretend that there is some sort of golden era in which everyone was sort of reading these very, you know, these very dense and elaborate pieces, and really sitting down and getting to the root of the issue, right? But I don't think it's wrong to aspire for us to have, you know, to expect a little bit more in terms of both our coverage and our reactions to it. And I don't know, like, I know we've talked about this a bit before, but I think the simple, and again, this makes me sound probably a lot simpler than I really am, but like, the biggest one for me that I just keep coming back to is that I am astonished at how many times something gets written that is very clearly intended to appeal to a certain audience, that it's like basically pure pandering, and that instead of the answer being, what do you take me for, it's, yeah, right on, you gotta read this article and it's gonna show you just how wrong you are. And I'm like, no, this is repeating the exact same stupid thing you just said to me. And now I just know that there are two stupid people who think that thing rather than one. Like, nothing has changed in terms of the, you know, how bad this argument is, assuming that they even bother to make an argument. And yeah, I don't know, like, I feel that is a fairly low bar for us to sort of aspire to, you know, to get over. But on the other hand, too, like, I also know that the problem with that is not a supply problem. The problem with that is a demand problem. If people did not want to be lied to, if people did not want to be pandered to, the outfits would not survive that do that. But it is the other way around, right? It is a lot of people who want to just hear the same thing. And you know, as a consequence, you know, I think I've called it, right? It's Fox News, right? You may not be watching Fox News, but there are definitely a lot of people who want Fox News just with a particular conclusion that's different. Now, again, I'm speaking more in terms of gaming terms, so the political element is hopefully divorced from it. But still, right? Like, you know, it's not so much you're not so much looking for information as you are looking for confirmation. And sometimes there is some value in that, right? You are following a hunch and you try to shore up, you know, your argument with some evidence, but ideally you are doing that, you know, for the points against too, because that also makes you smarter. Anyways, I think I did say I was actually going to move on with the moon side of things. And again, I think Nearly Logical has a lot more to say on this than I do. I should maybe just stop talking because I am feeling I'm feeling very, very woozy. Anyways, sand stories. So flowers, beverages. We tried the stimfling already. Holding back. Get your tea, unless you don't want it. No, go nuts. Feel free to hold forth. Nearly logical. I'm gonna get my tea when I finish trying the moon stuff that I want to do here. So what's my best moon to work with? It's like a forbid. Well, technically, a wormwood dream is my best moon to work with. But I will make do. This does take flowers, so probably Lenten Rose is the one that I want. No! Alright, well that gives me something to think about. There's definitely a moonflower for me to... Was it Sea Holly? Well, we've got the 15, so... So beverage next. Kind of an open question as to what. Now again, it's probably, we're at the point here where I shouldn't be surprised that something like the flower isn't turning out, because we are looking for specific, we are starting to look for specific recipes here. The problem is I'm actually trying to remember something other than a stimfling that I create. I guess the lethe would probably be the, that would fit both. Now the lethe I don't think has a moon side to it. Okay. So Solomon's preparation is listed here, but I have a feeling that that has more to do with Inks of Containment and the rather foolish decision I made to... regarding including all of the recipes in one go. What I am interested in, though, is the Asmeal. That probably is something that I could reasonably expect a result from. So let's give this a shot. Vesper's going to be a little quiet now because you're about to do a photo shoot in Final Fantasy XIV, but your chosen location requires you to run a raid beforehand. Well, good luck on the raid. I'm not going to feel offended if you are otherwise occupied. I do actually appreciate all of you hanging out in my current state, because there's a side of me that thinks I should have just said, you know what, I'm not feeling up for it and I shouldn't stream. But I'm actually delighted that all of you are here, so. Okay, now, unfortunately, the Asmeal didn't turn out either. And the drawback here is that I know there are other moon recipes that I should... Actually, you know what? Maybe the better thing for me to do here, because I need to seed my moon and rose... Okay, remains. Periost, we've got the Stimfling that makes the Wormwood Dream. So I'm not going to do this for everything, but I think probably here, just so I can see some basics. Okay, Solomon's preparation is actually something that Um, so with that in mind, I will try... Fair enough. Now, okay, so there is one other thing I want to try then. I'm going to do the same thing with rows because it's possible that there's more than one rows entry here. So memory and enduring reflection. I think that's it in terms of rows until we get to sand stories. So there's not a whole lot for me to go on otherwise. Although I do have an enduring reflection, so there we go. It's another one of them crafty double entries. You said I could. I worry about the woozle effect in the news. Okay, I am not... Oh, sorry, you're describing it. Where a small blog will say something, then a medium blog will grab it, and then it's on the front page of a news site, which the original blog uses as proof that it's the truth. Yes. Isn't it... I think Neil Gaiman has actually confessed to writing a small inaccuracy somewhere and then finding that something that he wrote is now actually used as the... finding that it is used as sort of the authority for this false thing being on Wikipedia or something. I'm probably butchering the tale. But no, you're right. And I think this is probably why you're bringing up AI on this, because of the way Google is placing... Well, actually, I guess it's not just Google now. There was that whole Quora business about... God, what was that? It's something ice in the microwaves. We talked about this. But yeah, just a clear falsehood, which because of the sort of the cost function that's applied in terms of... Or maybe that's not the term that I want to use, but basically... no raindrop thinks it's responsible for the flood, right? Each of these things might be very reasonable in isolation, and yet it's created a situation in which a position of authority is now claiming something clearly false is a fact, is the top result. And then the thing that actually drives me nuts the most out of this. So you combine this with generative AI, negative bias to social media, and you've literally watched the truth fall apart in real time. Yeah. The thing that actually drives me up the wall on this one is you will get a group of people, and I don't know if this is just an effort to sort of have a take or just to be interesting, but you will have people try to justify the most patent nonsense with a well actually, when what is called for is just plain common sense, right? So actually I'm going to look up the ice thing, because I know we talked about this on the broadcast, and I want to remember exactly what it was. All right, well, Quora is a disaster as far as tainting search results, so... Oh, this is it, right, melt eggs. Can you melt eggs was the one. Quora's AI says yes, and Google is sharing the result. Right, yes, so now I remember this. So I think it was something to the effect of Quora is really, really big on search engine optimization, and they're now using generative AI for some answers. And so, because the generative AI said that you can melt eggs, I think it uses ChatGPT. And, you know, so what you now get, right, is a bunch of actually people coming in trying to, like, justify, you know, the concept of melting an egg, and they'll use just this most tortured logic for it. But the thing that's, like, amazing here is that the actual full answer says the most common way to melt an egg is to heat it using a stove or microwave. Now, anybody who kind of knows how these things work can see the problem, right? You know, you've got a device which is sort of taking, you know, a high probability next word. And in this case, I don't think it's a full 50-50 in terms of, you know, in terms of the yes or the no. But for one reason or another, it decided to answer in the affirmative. And then the next few words afterwards are going to be something to the effect of, we're now going to explain how this thing works, right? It's the same reason why people have got, you know, why you've got, like, lawyers getting in trouble citing legal arguments that don't exist. Because it's capable of making things that, or making statements that sound convincing to the reader. That's the thing that it's trying to achieve. But, you know, just don't have any relation whatsoever to reality. So it's actually one of these cases where you'll sometimes, and again, I don't mean to suggest this is a widespread thing, but, you know, when you do have the actually group that tries to come in and sort of say, this is actually right. You know, you're just not sophisticated enough to understand the world the way the rest of us, you know, the rest of us do. I don't know. Again, you just get nonsense on top of nonsense. When, you know, you would imagine that the sensible answer is, yeah, that is silly that's saying eggs. You know, you can melt eggs in a microwave. You've just written a white paper on how LLMs also hallucinate with code. I imagine that happens quite a bit, because unlike human language where you can sort of work your way out of an awkward sentence, code is sort of written to be very specific. So either you are doing something that's very boilerplate, at which point maybe the you know, the LLM is an indictment of current coding practices, or you're doing a real project, and then if you're doing a real project, it doesn't necessarily have something to draw from. Anyways, let me actually read what chat's saying here. So yeah, Ripley's got, I've just written a white paper on how LLMs also hallucinate with code. Palword has been a good example of this in gaming recently. There's so legit criticisms about how close some of the pals are to Pokemon, and you return to people saying that it's using generative AI because the CEO said something nice about AI in games. Yeah, okay. So this is actually one of the things that I've been writing on, and I'm just trying to write something that won't have a particular type of reader just yell at me, because I don't want the blog to be every single article is something that makes someone mad, you know, for reading, right? I would like to be provocative in the sense that I force people to think. I don't want to be the place where you go to just get, like, the Andrew Ryan version of any given argument. But yeah, so one thing I noticed online is that there seems to be a big campaign to shame people for using generative AI. And what I see this as is a kind of a clash of what works in small social groups compared to larger ones. So, social embarrassment is a very good motivator for a lot of people. You can enforce a certain behavior by sort of threatening to kick someone out of the group, or to let them really know that they're on the outs. And you'll see this all the time online, right? Like there is, I'm sure everyone here has probably experienced someone telling them, "You're following so and so. Don't you know that they've done, this sort of stuff," right? And the threat is a reasonably credible one. And it's one where you can usually get people to comply, just because it really sucks to be, on the outs. It's not pleasant to be kicked out of a group. So, in this sense here, it is actually often quite effective in terms of getting people to behave a certain way. And you'll sometimes see people who are maybe on the margin, who don't necessarily agree with a particular action that's being taken, but because there is a very large number of people doing it, particularly within their social group, they will come along, or at the very least, they know better than to sort of speak up against it, and obviously that creates its own set of problems. But what's interesting about the AI thing is that I think that this would be effective for maybe getting a certain group of small developers not to use generative AI in their in their games. But in terms of a larger public, the threat isn't there anymore, right? So if a bunch of, I'll just use game developers as an example. If a bunch of indie game developers tell you that they're going to shun you for playing a game that uses generative AI, you're probably not going to be that bothered by it, unless you happen to be. I mean, I know there are a few people who do like indie games who watch the channel, but chances are most of the people watching this channel are not really going to lose a whole lot of sleep over the fact that the independent game community, doesn't follow them on Twitter or something like that. So, no, there are probably other groups that, you'd be a part of that maybe you'd feel a little bit more strongly about. But I think it's just the case that it maybe was, I think some people had this impression that maybe that worked for, NFTs or something like that. And the thing is, I just think NFTs were really, I think those went away because they just were not profitable. I mean, they were profitable for some people, but in terms of larger companies, I just think in the end it didn't really deliver. So they kind of just quietly killed those projects. I don't know if it had anything to do with people shaming the companies into not doing it. But yeah, just in the case of the generative AI stuff, there seems to be this idea. The two arguments that I really don't like from people on this are, again, trying to shame people out of either enjoying something with it or playing something with it, because in the end, at that point, it has very little to do with the subject, and a little bit more about whether or not this group is able to sort of move you in a particular direction, right? I will be moved in a direction or another if a compelling case is made. The other one that I don't really like is when people are saying, well, I don't like it because it's not very good. And it's okay, well, that's actually, in one sense, a perfectly legitimate reason to not like generative AI, but I'm not entirely sure you can apply that to a game like Pal World by virtue of the fact that there are so many people who are enjoying Pal World. Again, I don't know if the thing actually uses generative AI or not, but clearly there are people who are enjoying this thing. And where I really kind of became aware of this was the Avowed poster, the key art that people were talking about. Yeah, fair. The Avowed key art I noted, like, so I gave Ellen Ripley actually saw this. And sorry, I read myself, but I didn't read aloud the thing that you were saying. So one of the things it does is just makes up the names of libraries. I think you were working on this paper when we talked about this last, actually. So it makes up names of libraries which don't actually exist, and then threat actors can take those names and dump malware under that name. So feel free to share that. I know you're going to share that with Nearly Logical, but just definitely feel free to share that with me as well. But yeah, so like I gave a trolley comment because everybody's talking about how good this key art is. So I do what I do what I normally do and just leave a comment below. It's like, I wonder if the artist will share the prompt that they used to create this, right? Because of course I want to be a little rain cloud on on everybody's Twitter experience. Um, but what I noticed was, and I'm really hoping that I'm not responsible for this, but I noticed that there are a bunch of comments that were coming under this. It's like, yeah, but it's AI generated, and I'm like, but this is the thing, right? Like, if you have pinned your hopes on like generative AI is not going to work as in art for games because the quality isn't there, and you're now writing this on something where everybody is talking about how impressive this image is, and you're now trying to sort of say, oh, this image is bad because it was AI generated. It's like, well, why? Because it used to be that the argument was about the quality of the image. I think it's completely reasonable to talk about intellectual property concerns. I think there's lots of different ways that you can talk about this and have sort of a cogent argument about why maybe we should be figuring out a number of things before we start using these in games and before we start applying the models the way that they have been. But it really does seem to be that you've got this absolutely unshakable prior, which will always be adjusting to there's never going to be a point where somebody doesn't you know doesn't condemn it for being AI generated, despite the fact that it's a completely circular argument most of the time, saying that this thing that everybody this thing that everybody is saying is very good is in fact not very good because it's AI generated, and we know that it's a AI generated things are bad. It's almost sort of I guess it's like a new variation on the No True Scotsman. But I've been rambling a whole lot, so I'm going to put up the brakes. I'm not going to run ads or something like that, but I'm going to boil some tea, because hopefully after I stretch my legs and get a hot drink in me, I will try and be a little more coherent, but at the very least I'll try and get the skills that I need done, because I know I've been very chatty the last couple of streams, which I don't mind, but I do also want to get to the end of the game. So it's also, there's been a correlation between chattiness and sleepiness. That is a usual thing, but yeah, I'm gonna get my tea finally, and you can actually try and, I don't know, move from my nonsense to something that makes sense. And we'll Selfea, very good to see you. I'm going to assume that you're the one who brings people who. Oh, sorry. I actually I just saw your waving ghost too. I'm going to assume that you're the one who are summoning the people who want to tell me how to play Book of Hours. So I'm looking forward to a new one when I visit. But yeah, I'm going to take a couple minutes to boil the kettle. Well, I won't boil the kettle. I'll boil the water in the kettle. Cora told me that you can melt a kettle by putting it in the microwave. Anyways, I'm just gonna try and get myself sorted out, and like I said, I won't run ads or something like that, but I'm gonna be quiet for a little bit while I try and find my equilibrium. See you in a bit. Okay, I don't know if I'm more coherent, but I know over the last hour I've lost a follower, and I don't blame them. And I know there's only a handful of you, but I will not let that get in the way of shouting out Salfea. And in fact, I believe that both Salfea and Ellen Ripley, I owe a belated Happy Australia Day. I learned that there are actually some Australians in the new place where I work that apparently do host a party for Australia Day, so I picked the wrong day to show up. That would have been... well, they wouldn't have taken me on the Friday, but anyway. But yeah, there you have it. So yes. But in any case, the Australianness is not the only quality for you to watch Salfea for. Salfea is a nice variety broadcaster, has a lot of other broadcasters watching them, in fact. But somebody I found through Dendrian is just generally a nice person to hang out with. So I would have missed out on burnt sausage. Yeah, no, so it was kind of just, I got a tour of the building that I'm working in. It is a very, very nice building that I'm working in now. And it does turn out that it's shared with a couple of groups that I wasn't aware of. So they're the ones responsible for the parties. But Salfea is indeed pretty awesome, modest and humble too. Well, this is such a disaster of a shout out, but I'm feeling I really need to turn this stream around for the back 2 hours. But in any case, I'm obviously really worn out, but I'm very enthusiastic about the place that I am working, and definitely feeling like I am probably in over my head, and I am really going to need to figure out how to perform. But then I imagine that is probably what you want out of a job, because if you're going into a job that you feel is not challenging you, then you are probably not going to feel very satisfied there for a long time. But yeah, that is apparently why I was thinking of Australia Day. So there you have it. Let's go back to... So let me just make sure I got my Sand Stories note down. I didn't, so I did the thing, but I didn't actually write the note. So let me just put that down. Okay, so the next one was Purifications and Exaltations. Wait, really? So why did I put Sandstone? I'm not even going to question it. It's here. I'm going to work with it. All right, so let's find... I think we can use one of the old... solar altar, well, the solar altar for that. And we'll start with, actually no, Fost is the only one we should work with because it's Lantern and Sky. Okay, so there's a couple of obvious candidates here in my view. Now, interestingly enough, it has apparently not been tested with the Mazarine Fife, but I don't believe I can put any tools in here. We haven't tested with an Ascendant Harmony, which to me is the most obvious one to test. Okay, interestingly enough, that wasn't one. So we're looking for the level 15s in this case. Hey, Takri, it's very good to see you. Here to lurk while you prep for a Thursday game. I never mind if it's a lurk. I'm always happy to see you though, so thank you for stopping by. Good luck in your prep. Actually, I'm just trying to think. The Wind and Waiting is kind of like a final recipe, so that wouldn't mean much anyway. Well, anyways, let's carry on with the sky stuff. So, essential periost is one of the items on the list. Now, I'm going to take a minute here just to add the Ascendant Harmony so I have the extra sky to work with. Now, I would be shocked if this... Oh, actually, hang on, no, because Aronoscopy had something similar. But that's not a valid input. Deer Day Lens, I wonder if I can even fit that in. I don't think that would do anything for us here, but... Okay. What about wood? It does take fuel, so we can check the wood. This would presumably make a Mazarine Fife if it does. Okay. Light. Now again, the problem I have here is the level 15 stuff should be making sort of final versions. But I don't mind eliminating possibilities. Metal. I think I'm going to have to save that for later. Ichor Auroral would be interesting. Okay, so that's Xanthotic Essence. So what if I add the Xanthotic Essence? We've got the Iotic, which makes Xanthotic, and if we add the Iotic... Interesting. I should add those to the lantern side of things right now, but I'm focused on sky. So let's finish off the last of the sky entries. So... I needed to put it with the Mazarine Fife first. Interesting. So now I need to find a place to put it basically remains in sky. I don't think any of these... Yeah, these don't take remains, so I gotta find a place that takes sky and remains. Well, this I can probably sneak into... Yeah, so that's 20 sky to work with. That's also not on the list. Okay. So, unless the metal does something, we either need to expect all of this will come from... Oh god, how do I even make metal work here? Kind of funny if you think about it, right? Like refining metal This sort of seems like the sort of thing you might be able to do with alchemy, but not here. Okay. So the best bet that I can get here is that whatever we are doing with purifications and exaltations is going to be purely lantern driven. And we have got a lot of stuff we haven't tried. So first thing on this list is Eigengrau, which is pretty much a waste of time, but if it's on the list, I want to do it. That's the whole point of doing this thing. So this doesn't have a lantern part, so we'll throw the revelation in. Okay. Xanthotic Essence, now we basically did that, but again, I'll just verify, because if I don't actually do the action, I'm almost guaranteed to say, nope, doesn't work, when I haven't in fact tried, so yes, that didn't work. I think we're in the same boat with Ichor Auroral, but again, oh, that's Vitreous. I suppose technically making a Xanthotic Essence, but okay, Vitreous, same story. I suppose we haven't tried Glass. Now, I'm not expecting any miracles with Glass. If anything, that would give us another level 10 item, but it's not a hardship to try, so... Okay. Tanglebrag, again, I'm expecting this just to be something that's on the list that isn't actually used. Yeah. Now, Refulgun would be interesting, because we've never really been able to find a role for that. Okay. Deerday Lens I may need to try somewhere else. Yeah. Old Moment. Now, that's one I haven't tried. And a flower. Now that is a real puzzler. Cured! Good evening. Got out of work early tonight, so you get to stick around for the stream. Happy to hear that. I have not been doing my best, Cured, I'll admit. I'm really, really tired. But I'm happy to have you here, and I am hoping that so many... And I'm actually very pleasantly surprised at how many people who I just like having in have been kind of coming in and chatting, and even announcing that they're lurking. So I'm hoping that that will kind of give me a bit of a second wind in terms of being able to just get stuff done. But I know I've been sort of underperforming for this last little bit. So let me just take a second here. I'm going to try the 15 levels. I want to see if I can find any obvious... Yeah, so Ichor Auroral we've already covered. Ichor Vitreous and Xanthotic Essence we tried. Nope, wrong one. I mean, I could try Watchman's Paradoxes and Inks of Revelation, but I think these are just telling me the same thing that I already know. So, we've got a big lantern mystery I haven't figured out yet. Yeah, thank you, Kieran. I'm pretty much rolling over into bed immediately after the stream, but I mean it's good. Like, it's tired for largely good reasons. It was a good full day at work, and the only drawback is that while I tried to get an early night last night, either my sleep habits sort of caught up with me, or I just, usual nerves and whatnot got in the way of a proper night's sleep. So with that in mind, I have had days where I've actually had less sleep and I felt more alert during the day. The only thing I can imagine here is that I was walking through the building for most of the time, and so probably there is a difference between a day where you're sort of on your feet all day, without a full night's sleep, and then a day where you're sort of sitting and doing a regular bout of things. So yeah, curiously enough, there is a body attached to this mine, but yeah, it's not like I don't want to make a big deal out of it. It's just I'm just I'm kind of, I think the biggest thing for me that I'm getting a bit self-conscious on is that I realize it's been a couple of streams now where there's been a lot of talk and like less progress in the game. And I know for some people that's fine, and then for another group of people, they do actually want to see how this game ends. And I feel like I can handle both, but I do need to make sure that I am actually doing both. So that's kind of the big one for me right now. But it's clear that with Purifications and Exaltations, we're dealing with something that either isn't Lantern or Sky, or it's a Lantern and Sky that we haven't encountered yet. So I'm ready to move on. It's our last for the day, and that's glass blowing and vessel crafting. So that's actually going to be some more knock for me to deal with. So we'll start with the knock and then move to the Sky. Now, do we have a memory recipe for these? We do not. Okay. Now, I have honey written down, and again, I'm suspecting this is when I lost my mind and started including ingredients for both, which was a really dumb thing for me to do, but I will test the honey. I just won't test it at this altar because I can't put honey at this altar. And there's obviously lantern stuff here. In fact, given that there's more than one lantern thing here, I should probably just try a batch of lantern stuff for the sake of it. Okay, so one thing I want to try and add is liquid, whatever I can get. Now, I think pigments wind up not being liquids. Oops. So maybe we want to move to a different... Okay, so yeah, we've got the metal, we've done that already. Let's try... Actually, this is one where I can probably try the honey, so just so I can eliminate the possibility. Both types of honey did not produce anything. And I think those counts as liquids. Yes. So glassfinger toxin would be the last... Well, we know what that produces. Okay, well that's it for the knock. I guess we try the sky now. So the ones we didn't try here were metal, ichor auroral. We did try liquid. We didn't try liquid with sky though. And xanthotic essence. I don't think any of that is going to work. Now, I don't think I can actually fit a metal in here. What about the ichor auroral? Cool. That's going to be one that I look for in the future, I think. Xanthotic essence, then. Iodic essence. So metal was the last one on this. Let's see if I can make that happen now. I don't think there's a way for me to get the knock part in. Although I wonder if I can get enough sky. So I couldn't add sky with my Faust. That's 12. Okay, it's the same for both, so... First of all, I wouldn't be able to add the metal here, so I don't know what I think I'm doing. Maybe the workbench? Should have checked if I could have added metal. Okay, material. Now, unfortunately, I can't use this at the glassware. Condignator lets me use a tool, but doesn't let me use metal. There's not a lot of options to work with tool. Oh, obviously you can't say for sure given how life is, but are you streaming on Friday? I'm more likely to stream on Friday than I would any other day of the week for the simple fact that, sure, I might be feeling a bit worn out, but at the very least... So, like, here's the thing for streaming today. I do have the option, and in fact, the reason why I was about half an hour late at the start was... I just thought, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to be carrying a ton of sleep debt with me into the week, so, like, maybe I'll just have a nap before the stream. So I did. But, of course, the drawback is it's never just the nap you think it's going to be, right? There's always that tendency to go a little longer. So, you know, once I kind of actually got myself up and ready to broadcast, like, you know, half an hour has gone by. So the nice thing about Friday, like, so the thing is if I just didn't set an alarm or anything, the problem is that then I'm gonna sleep for like half of the, you know, half the duration, and then now, you know, I'm gonna feel alert enough after having had a bit of a nap that I'm gonna find it impossible to go to sleep. And be up in time for work, and then that just continues the cycle. So here I really pushed myself. I want to broadcast because I want to be the sort of person that does the broadcast, you know, unless there really is something that prevents him from doing it. You know, I actually think, yeah, we had a knock here all along. But I guess it's the other stuff I need to see whether or not I can pull off. But yeah, so the again, this is longer than it needs to be, but the thing that I was more the thing that works for Friday is that, like, let's just assume that every day this week I wind up feeling like I do right now. On Friday, what I can do is I do have that option for a nap, and sure, I might start later, and it's not my ideal to start later, but my outside option absolutely is to just, rest, feel better, and then stream on Friday. So it's the Mondays and the Mondays and you can see the problem with getting my thoughts together. It's the Mondays and Wednesdays, which are the real difficulties. But again, all of this is just me getting used to a new schedule at a new job, right? Like, this isn't going to last forever. It's just it's lasted longer because on the front end, I've got me wrapping up my work at my old job. So I kind of ran hot for that. And then on the back end, I've got me starting the new job, which involves kind of getting up earlier. And it just winds up being that I've sort of hit myself kind of at both ends to just create this horrible, oh God, when am I going to get out of this sort of dilemma. But again, it'll be worked out. I just kind of need to get everything in line. Okay, there's one last thing I want to do here. I want to see what kind of lantern I can bring to bear, because there's a chance that there's a level 15 lantern waiting for me. This is definitely going to be tough. Okay, so that's 13. Well, for that, I can probably add another Faust. Okay. That's one short. I can't remember if the Living Relic... No, I don't think we have any lanterny... History wax, maybe? Got him. Sorry, Kree. Although I'm not fully sorry, it's still tempting. Alright, let me just make a note here. Okay, so Icar Auroral is on the lantern lists for future. But yeah, streamer health and well-being is greater than zero. I agree, Selphea, but I've also noticed the other half. So when I was doing my exercise of like really getting myself down to write every day, I did notice that giving myself a little bit of sternness in terms of making sure that, I did the thing no matter what, and that mismanagement of time just meant that I had to pay the price. That was pretty good at instilling a bit of discipline in me. So I don't want to, I'm not going to run myself ragged. I know like I said, I haven't been super happy with the broadcast and just the rambliness over the last couple of times, but I'm not gonna grind myself into powder just to hit the numbers, but I'll get it. I'll get this all sorted out for sure. And Cured only asked because it's one of the few days you can watch the whole stream, so you wanted to make sure you stop by. All right, absolutely, I am going to be streaming Cured, and I will do my best to start. I know, if I'm not mistaken, you are based in the UK, so I realize that is a weird time for you. So I'm also going to do my best to start on time, because I know Fridays are normally days when I start late. So as always, no promises, and Twitter is always the best place to know when I'm getting started. So if you haven't noticed me, tweet out. But It probably means that I'm a bit delayed, but yeah, I really do appreciate the fact that you do stop by and you let me know. You work the night shift, so you're aligned with your guys over the phone. Oh, that's great to hear. Actually, well, not great for you. I mean, I'm sure it's kind of nice if you had a day life, but no, I've actually always really appreciated the fact that you kind of stop by, even when you know you can't stay. That you just kind of come in and say hi. It's a little bit like Cree, right? Who, despite my deepest urge to click this button here, I won't, because she's nice. But yeah, it's just one of these things that I do like the fact, those little gestures do actually kind of mean something. So where I can, I try to reciprocate. And if I can't put on a good show, at least I will. I'll put on a timely show. Better now. All right, now I don't have a whole lot that I can do with the rest of the day. The one actually thing I should do is probably get a memory. Let me just take a quick look. Okay, this isn't actually the one that I wanted to read, but I've decided I will share. I'm going to read this anyway, just because I was reading about bees. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Whether you get gaming talk or system talk, it's always a good job. I appreciate that, Kieran. It is fair to say, though, that I would like to just get a little more balance in terms of the broadcast. I really do love Book of Hours, but it would be nice to just sort of get back to doing a bit more variety. I think even when House of Light comes out, depending on how long that DLC is, I might make it so that I have a regular Book of Hours day as opposed to sort of turning the stream entirely into a, like, again, I'm absolutely not, I don't regret this at all. I like doing this, but I just know that there are a couple of other games which I'm also really looking forward to. Mjolnir's Might, how are you doing? Which I know I've kind of put on the back seat in favor of Book of Hours. So, Flobe, is Alta Simulator similar to this, or is it a completely different flow? Well, this is a tricky question, Flobe, because I'm sure you know it's from Weather Factory. It's the same developers, takes place in the same setting. So, the best that I can say is that the best way to think about Book of Hours is it is an effort to provide a different perspective and different feeling for people who, under normal circumstances, would have liked Cultist Simulator if it wasn't a roguelike. So, the drawback with making this or you can check out Vesper's YouTube playthroughs on YouTube. Or my playthroughs on YouTube too, but I think Vesper probably might be a better representation of going through the start of Cultist Simulator, particularly if you haven't played before. But yeah, so the challenge that I sort of feel that Book of Hours is trying to address is you've got a group of people who really want to like Cultist Simulator. So they're not necessarily opposed to having to learn the game by playing it, and they're not necessarily opposed to the fact that the game sort of holds back the secrets a little bit. or maybe not even a little bit, but a lot, right? Like you need to be the one to sort of draw those connections together. But it is a lot to ask the player if, in addition to all of that, there is this constant timer ticking down that will either starve you, or you'll get despair, or basically a number of different things that will give you an involuntary ending, and then you have to start over again. There's a certain type of player, and again, I'm not going to try and suggest that one style of play is better than another, but I think there's a lot of people who are like, I really want to like this thing, but it is a lot to throw me back to the start, for not meeting these requirements. And so the reason why I'm taking the time to unpack this for you, Flobe, is that I think this may or may not touch on what you're talking about in terms of a flow. So the thing I will say for Hush House is that this is a game, you've inherited this, occult library. I'm very far in the game at this point. You actually have to unlock each individual room in this game. But so far as I can tell, there are not involuntary endings in this game. So you do not have a way of starving to death. You have friends in the village. You get a stipend from St. Ronwin's. Your basic needs have been taken care of. It's no longer a game about sort of the hostility of the mundane world to sort of this world of ideas and sort of your ambitions. And instead what this does is it takes this opportunity to go much deeper in the sort of the lore of the world. So there's a lot of investigation inside of the house, finding out who the previous librarians were, what happened to them. There's an indication of a fire. And so there is still that depth, and there's a lot of sort of piecing out. But the difference here is that this is a game where the only thing you really need to worry about is maybe the season is going by and you're going to have a different set of things to work with. Whereas Cultist Simulator is definitely quite a harsh game in terms of the fact that if you don't meet all of the requirements, it will fail you. So in the sense of exploration and lore, all of that is there. The only difference is that it's taken away the sharp teeth. I actually have a little difficulty saying which one is better. I think it's even a question in terms of taste, for a given day. Am I feeling like I want to have my leg kind of caught in the bear trap, or do I want to just sort of take my time and sip some tea? So, yeah, no worries. Well, again, like it's a challenge here. So when you talk about flow, like when I think of flow, right, like the basic thing that I have here in terms of crafting different recipes, like in terms of reading the books and putting all of the recipes together to make something, all of that's identical to Cultist Simulator. So it's really just that question in terms of the severity of not meeting that timer. So that's the difficulty I have here, right, in terms of whether or not. Some people would say that that's not that different. Other people will say it's night and day. So anyways, I'm glad that some people don't like the detailed explanations, but in this case, I think it's different. Are there any punishing mechanics? No, definitely not. So if you're wanting the roguelike of Cultist Simulator, definitely go for Cultist Simulator. This one is much more go at your own pace, and that's not to say that there are not challenges. If you check out the Weather Factory Reddit, you will see a lot of people who say that, oh, I'm stuck in the game, this is a soft lock or something like that. So the challenge is there, but you will be able to kind of treat it like the single drop of water, burrowing through the mountain, right? You can take as much time as you want for that. And so in that case, I would definitely say not punishing. Challenging, your mileage may vary, but not punishing for sure. The Sky and the Scar. Gnomic exhortations that might be described as emergency procedures for the return of the traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross. Each page of this book, except the last, bears a single sign, clear and irrefutable as a gem. The final page is empty. The traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross might never return. When the traveling Carapace kinds passed beyond the wave and the sky, they made arrangements for their return. There are histories where those arrangements might be invoked. So we can't put this in the journal, by the way, because we've already committed a history tour journal. But I am curious, how many of you know about the bees on the rooftop of Notre Dame Cathedral? Or in a slight abuse of the French, Milady Cathedral? All right, I forgot that we were going to get an order from Oriflammes. So, Oriflammes, established 1776, Sense, Signs, Sciences. Dear librarian, we would like to offer you this opportunity to purchase Ogkor Tisilek Ogkor, a surprisingly chatty text by an entity that identifies itself as the Excellency Nathobasis, and is not written in a language that... All right. This is apparently English. Oriflammes thanks you for your custom. I am very interested to see what comes out the other end of this. I've carried the memory like a flambeau, safe through the mazes of night. Okay, so does nobody know about the bees on the roof of Notre Dame Cathedral? This is news to people? I'm going to try and get through the recipes early today. You do not know? Okay. No, I'm totally fine if people don't know. I thought this was more widely known. So of course, people know about the tragic fire at Notre Dame. So, does anybody want to know whether or not there are still bees on the roof of Notre Dame? Because I have a hypothesis about this. Yeah, I think I am going to go for pentiments and precursors. I think we're going to get an early start on our studies here. So pentiments and precursors, we can start with the Grail side in the alchemy kit. Especially because we're probably going to be able to read the text before the end of the day. And it's pretty weak in terms of what I've got for Grail. So the bees, quite miraculously, survived the fire. So there's a bunch of beehives that they keep on the roof. It's part of, I think there's a specific group that maintains them. So it's part of this, I mean, it seems to be a thing that happens a bit more often, but people keep bees and just kind of, they'll run and pollinate and do the things that bees do. And, oh man, actually it's a 10 gray. Oh no, hang on, this should be an easy one. So add fabric and then we're done. I don't even need to get clever with this. So that's one off the list. But yeah, so like obviously, I mean, when the fire of Notre Dame is going on, maybe the first thought isn't to the bees, but certainly I was feeling rather bad about them. Bees are, admirable creatures and such. But yeah, so it took a little while, but they did some drone footage, so to speak, and the hives were intact, and sure enough, the thousands of bees that are in those colonies survived. So the thing is, the fact that the bees survived the incredible heat of a fire like that, because again, I think it's the sacristy that they're on top of. This actually starts raising some questions, because we also know that bees get drunk on smoke. So I want to know the bees' whereabouts in the moments before the fire of Notre Dame, because I think we have found our culprit. Back into balance. Anyways, on that note, great signs and great scars. Looks like it's another... Okay, basically everything with Grail that I can't handle is just just because of my lack of fabric. But it is amber and lapidary, so there will at least be one tricky one for me. So I think we can get away with at least a start in the alchemy kit. Next on Dateline, we interview the bees that started the Notre Dame fire. Listen, I'm not ready to throw any accusations yet. I'm just saying that, you know, it's a little convenient. So I'm wondering if there's maybe a lantern thing going on here. Anyways, first priority, let's throw the 4G things together and see what we can do. Oh, that's not good. I don't have any forge stuff. Just a minute here. Okay, so what I want to do before I go too much further on Anbury and Lapdairy, I do actually want to seed it with all of the things that have succeeded with Forge to begin with. Otherwise, it's going to be a complete pain in the neck. Okay, so orichalcum wire. Bells and braziers. It's the exact same. Now what does Hammer Time have to say? Okay, xanthotic essence. Okay, we've got something to work with here. Oh, pyroglyphics too. But it's the same. What I've decided to do here, sort of, I've added this kind of to my exploration algorithm. What I want to do is basically, if I'm getting a brand new aspect, which I haven't started a list for yet, essentially I just want to take the time to take the previous entries, the ones that I've already succeeded with, and just sort of seed that with some of the earlier entries. So pyroglyphics is the last one before Anbury and Lapidary. And now I can sort of test things like bitter black salts and so on and so forth. Which is exactly what we're going to do at the start. So now we're not up to 15 yet, so this is where I should also add... I guess in this case we'll add the iotic essence, although... Well, we know what happens if we add that one. Xanthotic it is then. Alright, well that, I guess, covers two possibilities. Hey, Lord Gloom, good to see you. Folks, in addition to Vesper Fortune and Selphea, we have now been graced with the presence of Lord Gloom himself, who I know best now actually through Escape from... Okay, well, I know through Cobalt Core, but I actually know better now as a Escape from Tarkov broadcaster, but I think that is just because Tarkov is the new hotness rather than being a sort of exclusive streamer on that game. Okay, interesting. So none of the 15s we found for Forge apply. But I know Lord Gloom is interested in the Secret Histories games. So that is something that you can look forward to in the future. But on top of that, it's actually just a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to hang out with, and I genuinely enjoyed the Cobalt Core streams, and then from there I just kind of, well, I can't say I'm like a super regular just because I don't watch that much Twitch, but when I get a chance, I absolutely do catch their stuff. So. Gotta strike while the iron is hot for Tarkov. It's very zeitgeist in folks' minds. That's fair. I mean, I think I've been hearing about that game since I lived in Vancouver, so that feels like it has been in development and sort of, as you say, in the zeitgeist for a while. And again, I still haven't actually taken the plunge, but I'm sure they will do fine without me. Okay. The Ascendant Harmony might also require an instrument, so let me just eliminate that possibility. Actually, you know what? We can use the Mazarine Fife in this case. So the other hypothesis I'm dealing with here is that there might be a lantern aspect to this. Lightning is a little life, and jewels are its eyes. And I think there was a reference in... I think somebody was talking on the subreddit and said that the first part is likely a reference to Amber, which I would imagine gives it another kind of lantern association. Anyways, I'm going to start knocking off some possibilities on the list here. Billion years old, just wiped in December, so people go wild for a month or two, then it calms down. Okay. I mean, it's funny. In one sense, it's nice that games are like this. It's kind of interesting to see the variety that's emerged in terms of gaming now. Just in terms of the sorts of play experience, it's the business side is sometimes very interesting to look at, and sometimes one of these things that causes a lot of frustration. So like, I have continued to just be astonished at what's happening at Embracer, and it's not so much that all of the follow-on effects of what happened with Embracers, like all the stuff that we're hearing, like this Deus Ex game being canceled after 2 years of development and things. All of these stem from sort of the original problem, right? And the original problem arguably wasn't even the fact that there was like $1 billion of Saudi money that didn't come through. I think the problem was this idea that this is the only way that these massive acquisitions are going to work. That basically money is going to be cheap forever, and that there are these, very large deals that are going on. That's the thing that really astonishes me. And of course, the consequences are being felt now, and they are being drawn out in just this absolutely murderous, extended process of the Embracer restructuring. And again, people are legitimately mad about this. And this is kind of what I tried to get at in the most recent article in terms of the value of sort of the money guys and it's called the ideas guys of money. But the thing is that these are actually valuable roles that are very important in the process of game design. And the thing is, we should be mad when really reckless stuff happens. But the problem is that I often find that the argument tends to go somewhere along the lines of the business people are irrelevant to the process and are also the source of all of our misery. And I think there is a reasonable argument to be made that there is a lot of misery that is caused by the mismanagement of the business side, and that the business side actually performs a really important function that it should be compensated for the same way that a programmer or an artist would be compensated. And the important point about that argument is that it doesn't blunt the criticism of companies like Embracer, right? In fact, if anything, it sharpens the criticism, because it's basically the "you had one job" part of the argument. But yeah, the idea it's hard because I don't like this idea of backseat business, right? Like I've never founded a business. This doesn't count. I'm not entirely sure I would do well in that role. But when you look at some of this stuff here, it's also very hard to argue how my management would be different. Anyway, sorry, I didn't want to go on another rant. I don't have all night. But I am going to enter some sky entries. Interestingly enough, it looks like it was metal and ichor auroral. Metal ichor auroral and xanthotic essence we were going to try with the sky. I'm gonna try Vitreous. Yup. I knew it! So that's the second time we've had that happen too, so I should keep that in mind. You think it's kind of unanswerable. The business needs will drive decisions, but what the business is being held accountable for is largely a form and function of capitalism. Yeah, and I mean, like, so I also kind of understand to a certain extent that the reason for this criticism is largely that there's a lot of people who just don't like capitalism. And to that point, it is actually very difficult for me to find common ground because I am, again, I like to play up the whole Andrew Ryan thing, right? Like, I'm sure I'll say, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow at just about every opportunity I can. But I'm not a libertarian. I am not some guy who says, oh, if only we could just get the government out of the way, everything would run great. And I think there are plenty of examples that you can take to show why that's not the case. But I'm not willing to go so far as to say that it has not been an engine of significant progress. Like, essentially, I think a lot of the things that we are sort of like this great and glorious past of, oh, wasn't it wonderful before the capitalists came in and ruined everything, I actually largely think is a sort of a byproduct of that. Like, in the end, I just sort of think that the idea of private ownership is not really at the core of a lot of the issues that we're getting at. Or at the very least, I'm not entirely convinced that a switch to a command economy would get around the particular issues that people are talking about. I think there would be a different kind of mismanagement, but I think the level of unhappiness and the level of of kind of catastrophe would still be there. It would just be different people doing that. And again, like there is a very important difference here, because oftentimes when you're talking about when you're talking about capitalism, some sort of a more decentralized kind of approach, usually what the conversation is more about, how do you regulate, right? Or what are the laws that you put in place so that everybody's has a fair playing field, or at least an equal chance at success. So sometimes the difficulty is that if people are just fundamentally opposed to the idea of capitalism, it's very hard to find some kind of common ground. Because, like, for me, when I take a look at something like what happened with Embracer, this isn't the best analogy because this is actually the behavior of one company, but it's a little bit like the financial crisis, right? With the specifically the housing bubble. So you buy a house, right? So let's imagine that Embracer is like going and they're buying up all of these houses, right? Because the value of houses keeps going up and money is cheap. And if you are somebody investing in Embracer, you might say, well, look, they're acquiring all of these assets, and these are assets that produce an income, right? People pay their rent or they get kicked out. This seems like a really good business going on here. And then all of a sudden, Embracer says, oh dear, $1 billion deal fell through. We aren't actually able to do the maintenance on a great many of these houses that we were working on. We're going to have to start, we're going to have to restructure everything. And of course, in the meantime, interest rates have gone up. People are retreating from housing. And so, in this case here, those assets that seemed so secure all of a sudden aren't, right? There's no money to maintain them. There's no money to get the income-producing part out of them. But there aren't any ready buyers. And that's one of the things that is so tragic about the Deus Ex project, right? Because Mankind Divided, so far as I can tell, sold well. I seem to recall when... was it? It's Square Enix that did that, right? Because I think Eidos was... or Eidos Montreal, at least. Eidos was weird because I think it was divided into like different parts, but I'm pretty sure Eidos Montreal was Square Enix. I could be wrong on that, but I remember there was an adjustment upwards in terms of sort of projections, and they specifically cited it was Mankind Divided and one other game that they were talking about. So like it's clear that there is every reason to believe that another Deus Ex game would be successful, right? It is a strong franchise. It is one that people hold in high regard. And so, you would imagine that this is a valuable asset that is being produced. But ultimately, if you can't pay, that level of success requires you to invest a lot of money both in the production of the game and the promotion of the game. I'm not sure if most people know this, but I believe Cyberpunk, its marketing budget was equal to its development budget. I would not be surprised if for Call of Duty the marketing budget is larger than the development budget. And that's just because it's a piece of mass entertainment. It's like Hollywood. They need to spend billions of dollars in order to make this work. And that's the way that this sort of thing works, right? But again, if you don't have the money for it, you can't do it. But now this means that they acquired this company, and they're not able to realize any of the value out of it. But on top of that, they can't sell that to someone else because everybody else is busy doing their layoffs. And so the difficulty here is that, and this is why I draw the analogy to the 2008 financial crisis, when people are talking about these complicated financial products and things like that, they were all sort of predicated on this idea of a coordinated failure or coordinated drop in housing prices across the country. And one of the things which, again, not to do like the brighter side of capitalism argument here, but the one thing that I do think people tend not to consider and maybe should when they're, having a laugh at the people responsible is that it is precisely those financial products that created the coordination, right? It was something that, at least under certain models, I mean, again, there is definitely a problem with the models that they were using, but the idea here is that the creation of the product actually created a shift in the conditions under which the thing that it wouldn't work under did occur. So the basic idea of trying to take a whole bunch of different assets and cut them up in such a way that they're essentially kind of the price movements are uncorrelated. So like a good example here, right, is like, let's say you just want to have a house. You don't want to have a house as in an investment, right? You want a place to have a roof over your head and a place you can call home, build a family or whatever. You could argue that there's actually quite a bit of sense in creating a financial product which is negatively correlated with asset prices. housing asset prices. So that essentially what happens if the value of your house goes up, that particular asset goes down. But if the value of your house goes down, you have this insurance policy, you have this other product which is going up. So in the end, you cancel out the risk of the price movement for the house, and in the end, you have it for its use as a domicile. Now, of course, people tend to buy property because they want the value to go up, so there wouldn't necessarily... And I mean, again, you can cut this up in such a way. It's like maybe you only expose yourself to a certain percentage of the risk. But like on paper, you can actually see why that would be very desirable for people to have. And then, of course, you just expand that to a higher level and you say, well, banks are in the business of making these loans and so on and so forth. And then you have sort of the really corrupt stuff where they're giving loans to people who shouldn't be given loans, and they're relying on these predatory practices. There's absolutely no defending any of that stuff. I have no intention of doing that at all. But that on its own doesn't create a financial crisis. It's the house of cards that's built up on top of that, and this idea that securitization would sort of somehow get rid of the really risky ones. That was the problem. But I mean, again, like the analogy is a stretched one in terms of Embracer. Like the fact of the matter is that they made a fairly risky bet now in hindsight in terms of bulking up as much as they could with as many companies as they could, assuming that low prices would last forever. That didn't turn out. Not only are they out the money, but interest rates have gone up at precisely the time when they really need to be generating revenue from the studios that they have. And so as a result, it's not just that they own a bunch of studios that they can't maintain, but there are no buyers for them. And so their only option now is to close them. And this is essentially just complete value destruction. The shareholders should be completely pissed off with management. But everybody who is working on those projects, right, should be equally pissed off, because what you've done is you've taken a perfectly capable group of people who are able to create games and have a way of working together, and you've destroyed that, right? The best alternative that exists is essentially for someone in that situation, if they can, to found a studio with all of their coworkers, but that kind of money is not really available. Again, because everybody's sort of closing down. So unless everybody's kind of willing to work on spec, that just can't happen. Okay, so I'm happy that we found the Ashertine. Well, I mean, so I've actually talked with someone who's got a reasonably well anticipated indie game coming out. And we've talked about this a couple of times. So when I was breaking into film, and this is a union job, keep in mind, I worked for free a lot. And that was how I built up my skills and got my name out there. And that was how I broke into the film industry. Now, I'm not saying that it's right that I had to do that. And I'm not saying that, I would recommend other people do it that way, because in the end, I do sort of feel that people should be paid for their work. But the thing is that for particularly for people whose skills aren't there, being able to volunteer on a project can actually be the way that you get those skills. Now, obviously, that is completely different from what we're talking about. The thing is, I was talking with this person. This person has every intention of paying the people that they work with. In fact, I believe the financing they've gotten from the Australian government requires them to do so. So even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be allowed to. And I think it's a good thing that happens, for the most part. I mean, again, if you're trying to build an industry, right, being able to let people have those opportunities to contribute in a way that allows them to build up their skills, I do also think has a role to play. But obviously it's one that opens up a level of exploitation as well, which I wouldn't want to see. But yeah, the difficulty here is that they essentially had the same experience, where a lot of the opportunities that they've had, which of course, and again, for both of us, it would be fair to say that we had a career in these fields that people do find difficult to get in, specifically because of that, that free work that we did. And like I said, I mean, at least in my case, this was to get a union job, right? The sort of thing that the union's trying to protect you from. So even then, I think there's a level for complexity, but it's also like that's kind of a red herring, precisely because we're talking about studios that are suffering the effects of Embracer. So with that, you're dealing with a situation where like these are professionals. These are people who don't need to prove themselves, basically. So, but yeah, I feel like I need to give the devil his due on the work on spec thing. The thing I find difficult, and I knew it was going to be a lantern one here. I think the thing that I find difficult is that I would feel very bad to say, not to be honest about how I got into film, and to turn around and say, oh, it's that was okay for me, but it's not okay for you, right? I'm allowed to have the film career, but you're not. I want to be careful in terms of how I say that. I don't want to say this is the only path, and I was going to say, it's up to you to decide, because the thing is, I definitely worked for free too long, so I know what the other half of that is. But yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for me to take the principle, which is, people shouldn't work for free, and marry it with the things that have also worked for me. So that's one of the reasons why and again, like as you can see from Lord Gloom's haha, like right, like it's I'm gonna do the Andrew Ryan thing again, but I think if the job is free, it needs to be primarily for the benefit of the person working. Yeah, I think that is exactly the way to look at it. Nearly logical. Like the game developer I was talking to, really the conversation was about, for them, they made a very practical point in terms of like expectations, in terms of deliverables and such, and the great difficulty that's created in that situation. I think they have very fair. I think they have very fair concerns there. But yeah, essentially in this case, they're kind of, the conversation was largely about the fact that it is very restrictive to have this condition that everyone needs to be paid at a particular rate under this government financing, because what it effectively means is that their cost for making this game needs to be a certain value now. And what that means is that their expectation for every single person that they hire is that they're going to be at an experienced professional level. And that was not necessarily how they originally conceived of the game, which was a little bit more of like the scrappy indie sort of setup. But again, one of the conditions of their financing was this pay rate. And I don't think it's wrong to say, this is a good thing. Like, again, it's a government program. They are going to want to see an increase, not just in cultural output, but they're going to want to see the jobs that come as a result of it. But the cost of that is that this promising indie doesn't necessarily have the new up and coming talent that it would have, because in the end they need to make the money back. And in that case, that means that they need to hire. Effectively, the way to look at it is that the grant or the program that they're participating in has essentially priced them out of using junior workers. Now, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think there's a very reasonable debate to be had about it. But I think it would be fair to say that there are probably a number of creators that would not want to participate under that program for the very reason that they want a lower cost game. And, in the end, maybe some people want to be working for a share of the game, at which point, presumably that's a little more, I suspect nearly logical. You weren't thinking of like acquiring, I don't know, do you acquire equity in games? That seems weird, but, But I mean, I've been in that case in film. I never thought I was going to see a dime from it because the movie sucked, but people have paid me in quote unquote shares of the movie. The movie was never even completed. I was doing it for the experience. But yeah, absolutely. Like the thing I do feel uncomfortable to a certain extent with whenever I talk about this stuff is this very idea that a game is a thing of value, and generally it is the sort of thing that produces a stream of revenues. So if it just happens to be, if there's some like volunteer work on Minecraft, actually I guess that would be the story about what happened with the story at the end of Minecraft. Sort of this volunteer work for this, this game that wound up making, the at least the company $1 billion. But yeah, I don't know. And that's an interesting one, nearly logical. I'm actually possibly on the other side of that. Because there's also a side of me that says, like, when I think about the role of like the finance people versus the people who are doing the job, like, I think to a certain extent, if you are making the thing, if I go like, so the camera department, right? Most of the terrible movies and most of the box office bombs that you've seen have been beautifully photographed, right? The camera department's always done its work. And so there's this interesting idea that does the camera department now see less because, the script wasn't very good or because the director didn't know what they were doing? The director almost never knows what they're doing. Because this was something that came up in game developers. Someone was saying that the teams should be given a cut of the revenues from a successful film adaptation. And I kind of see where it's coming from, right? Like, it's like, well, these are the people who created this valuable IP and such. And I'm like, okay, but, now we're creating an incentive structure where, the biggest payday for the best workers now comes from establishing an IP that not just creates a franchise, but creates a franchise that will be adapted from Hollywood. And is that necessarily the incentive structure we want for the creators? Because there's another side, and this is closer to where I hew to, which is that ultimately coming up with new sources of revenue is kind of what the studio heads and like the money people are supposed to be doing, right? You make a game and then you make some merch for it. Maybe, you do seek out a film adaptation or something like that. And the argument for me is that the people producing the good should be paid more because the expected value of this product that they're creating is worth more. But ultimately what they should be getting is something more of a guaranteed value as opposed to some kind of conditional amount, which depends on whether or not the people on the top are actually doing their job. And the thing is, I actually suspect that there are people who kind of go both ways on that. I was considering a game industry job, and one of the things, a very large part of my compensation was very much tied to the performance of the company. And I ultimately turned that job down just because I'm like, I don't necessarily think this company is going to be doing that, like those kinds of numbers. Like I'm going to be doing my analysis thing, but I'm not entirely sure that, this company's best days are ahead of it for the next couple of years. So yeah, no, I agree completely, Lord Gloom. That's actually why I'm largely not in favor of this idea of of this residuals model. I mean, again, I can see some sense. Like, I think there are just better ways of doing that, right? So the idea of profit sharing or the other kinds of system. I mean, profit sharing gets exploited because of what happened at Gearbox, like essentially counting the cost of setting up a Montreal studio against the company's profits. I don't even think you're allowed to do that on your taxes. I think like buildings and all of that need to be amortized. But yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, that problem already exists, right? It's kind of hard to say. I think, was it Phil Spencer who was talking about this? Anyway, it's just the idea that like most of the franchises running around in gaming now are almost over a decade old. There's actually comparatively few new franchises, and it's largely because of the very risk-averse nature. Like this stuff costs a whole lot of money to make, and people are looking for a sure thing. But then one need only look at what's happening with Marvel and see that there aren't those kinds of sure things. But yeah, but I mean, the other thing too, nearly logical, I don't want to come out too strongly against this. The reason I haven't published that article yet, for the simple reason that I do kind of see, like, I'm less warm to a residual system, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's impossible for creators to, like, I'm not entirely convinced that the answer is creators should see nothing from the, the franchising or the, the exploitation of the IP in other fields. But obviously I'm an economist, right? So like half of the time I'm sitting down and thinking about the incentive structure of the system that gets created. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little more sanguine about it, but it's kind of just because in the end I've always thought that like my quote unquote ownership of a game is basically I'm just renting it to myself. I definitely feel like I can't imagine something like Book of Hours ever going on a subscription service. But it is kind of interesting to note that like I'm still subscribed to EA Play. And I really liked Battlefield 5, but I actually, even though Battlefield 2047 didn't really tear up the charts, I do kind of gravitate to that more now. And so the thing is that the actual value of my owned games do tend to go down over time, with a few exceptions. But no, you're absolutely right. Like everything does kind of seem to be a subscription now, and in some cases, I think they are. There are some cases where I'm like, actually, this probably is a more sensible way of doing it. There are a couple of professional apps that I can think of where I'm like creating some kind of continuity, like basically putting everybody on like the best version of it. Sort of seems to make sense. So like I was originally thinking of, I was like debating, there's an expensive statistical software called Stata. I think Nate Silver uses it actually, but it's like pretty much every economics paper is basically done in Stata. I was debating, I was like, what would it cost for me to get a copy for myself? And I was like, subscription? I don't like this, I'm mad about it. But it turns out they do have a purchasing option. And you just need to email them for the purchase option. And effectively, the purchase option winds up being, I think, about the 3-year subscription. The difference, though, is that the 3-year subscription version is, that grants you access to the most recent version of Stata. And so, at that point, the question is, well, how much do you value the most recent version of Stata, right? Like if you're willing to use the outdated version for a really long time, it actually makes a lot of sense to own that one. But I did actually wind up using Stata at my old job. I probably won't be using it at this new one. But I did actually notice that because I had access to the new one, I was definitely using a lot of the new ones. So that one, I actually am less. I was originally mad when I saw the subscription service, but I actually kind of believe them now when they said that we don't have it on our website because people don't use it. Ask us and we'll tell you. I'm sure they also want to just put people into the recurring revenue slot, but I imagine for them just being able to do tech support for the latest version as opposed to like trying to guide someone through the old version of the software, knowing that there is an updated version, which if they were on the subscription they'd be able to handle. That sort of stuff I can imagine is appealing to a software developer. On the other hand, there are games in my library. Like I couldn't imagine doing I believe Civilization is available on Xbox Game Pass, but I can't imagine doing anything but owning Civ. Yeah, assuming the latest version is better. Obviously, if the new version of Stata is no good, but like I've got a big. So there's a really good book by Colin Cameron and Pravin Trivedi. So they wrote a textbook called Microeconometrics, and then they've written a book called Microeconometrics Using Stata, which is both a very good guide to Stata, but also a very good applied book for doing econometrics using Stata. So I got the new edition for it because I didn't realize I was going to be moving out of a place that would give me access to Stata. But there's so much that's been added to Stata that it's now actually a 2-volume work. And like each volume is about the size of the old one. Oh, fair enough. But yeah, I do hope that the trend right now, like I'm hoping that basically we wind up at some sort of an equilibrium in which essentially subscription and paid coexist. I think Steam's strength more or less makes it that not everything's going to wind up subscription only. I know there are subscription options on Steam, but I think Steam is just too big and people are too attached to that particular platform and the idea of buying and owning a game that it would be hard for me to see it completely going away. But on the other hand, I can see, like, again, for me, I've always just kind of imagined it. I mean, again, I don't own a house, but I imagine this sort of the same way. It's like, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I mean, it's closer to that than Steam. So if we're going down the GOG route, fair enough. But I'd say Steam is at least closer to what you're talking about, right? Or are you really like firm on the whole idea that we shouldn't even have it on a digital distribute? Like basically, you want the GOG model. Let's get this started. Yeah, because like the thing on the Steam one, like, is I'm sensitive to the point, but I'm not entirely, like, I don't know enough about old software, but I've always been under the impression that essentially you have like software is licensed to you as opposed to it being one that you own. But yeah, I don't know. Like again, whether it's like owning a house versus renting a house is like, why do you own a house? Well, you basically so you can rent it to yourself. Well, I mean, I know some people use them for rental properties, but that's my conception of home ownership, to like have a place where you can go, is essentially you are buying an object to rent to yourself. That is the value of that object. It's like, what about game ownership in a world where Xbox Game Pass and the Ubisoft I guess Uplay Plus or whatever. Well, again, I buy Civilization so I can rent Civilization to myself. For people who value... Actually, there is one thing I'll say for the Xbox or the Game Pass model. Game Pass churns through its games very, very quickly. And so I do tend to find that it does seem to be built around discovering things that you're interested in as opposed to have them as part of the subscription service and never play them again. And so I do imagine that the people who make games that people love... Like, so here's a question for me. Like, would RimWorld, if it wasn't already massively successful, do well under the Game Pass model? Because obviously people put ridiculous amounts of time into RimWorld. So if they're on something like Game Pass for, N periods... and when it goes away, like, my expectation would be that you'd have, my expectation would be that you'd have a larger number of people who are buying this. Now, RimWorld's not a good example because it's achieved such massive success without that model, but you want to argue with an economist, but you feel a change to non-repairability and non-transferability of any non-consumable assets has been a pretty major wealth transfer. No, I think that's a fair point. I mean, again, like, it's... there's the idea of economic rents, right? Like, economists don't sit down and say everything. So this is actually one thing, because I did a lot of stuff on IP. The stance that I certainly take, and the one that I think every person I talked to on IP was the idea that IP exists to protect invention. It doesn't exist to protect companies' profits. Now, I think it would be fair to say most people believe that invention is spurred by the rewards for it, and so it's not to suggest that there is no financial component to patents, but it would be seen as a bad thing if there is some kind of excess, or if there's some sort of we really need to make sure that these people are able to keep their business running, because that's how the economy is saved. It's like, no, we need the engine through which these good ideas happen, and that's what we need to preserve. If a poorly run company falls apart because we didn't give them some special extension on their patent, that's their problem. So yeah, the idea that you're able, it just, sometimes this can be argued from a simple quality change point of view, right? So there's two halves that I would give, right? So let's take probably, I think, the example that most people would think when you think of non-repairability, the way that Apple builds its things. Now, there's a reasonable argument to be said that one feature of a lot of Apple products is, in fact, the fact that, they are trying to make them as small and thin, and they're kind of at the frontier of this sort of thing. And so there is a degree of complexity involved in creating those devices, but it would be ridiculous to assume that it is not a rather good business practice to make it so that it's actually very difficult, if not impossible, to fix the things and make you have to buy an item. And so, in one sense, the smaller, better phone is obviously a good thing. That's a quality improvement. But the fact that it is something that may not last as long, you don't get as much usage out of over a lifetime, that's clearly a defect, right? So the net benefit may be positive. But I also think this kind of comes back to the idea of, if you're talking with someone who's into econ and they think the good economic position is to say, let's just get the government out of the way. Obviously, consumer protection is an important part of the government, right? And I don't think this is just an EU thing. I think this is true for the States as well. That there's absolutely laws that are coming in saying no, you need to open these things up to repair. Anyways, let's try and get a little bit more before the stream is done. Ogkor Tisalak Ogkor, a surprisingly chatty text by an entity that identifies itself as the Excellency Nathobasis. The Excellency Nathobasis explains the limbs and extensions of potent and dangerous glyphic achievements. The sentences are nonsense on first reading, but quickly acquire an insistent meaning on each repetition. With adequate grail, the Excellency Nathobasis explains, the pale mommet wakes to life. With generous grail, the flushed mommet accepts our beneficence. It may be necessary to overcome scruple. The Excellency Nathobasis will assure you as to how and to whom, and with which most perfect instrument. Why do we blender the dog? Great signs and great scars. I don't think I'm going to be able to level that one up tonight, but let's see. And that gives us a pattern. I suppose this probably goes in the general pile. Actually, you've seen, I think it was, Jesse was Jesse was in the stream, rather alarmed. Or actually, maybe it was you, when I put the dog in the condignator. I have no intention of harming the dog. We may interrogate the dog, though. I'm trying to think if there's trying to think if there's something Mansis-y that I could... Actually, I'm wondering if, based on the sizes of some of these books, if I could maybe take some of the chunkier ones and put them into... Yeah, so not here. I think I've made... I think my library runneth over. So let's start an overflow. This probably would have been a good overflow room. Don't exactly want to put him in the cucurbit. Okay, that stairs off limits. You'll answer the question if you know what's good for you. Why are you such a good boy? I'm gonna have to be sure to do that at least once before I leave Hush House. So I need to find a new place for the seashells. There's got to be something up here. Like, this is kind of my hours stuff, so I'd rather not mix this up. But I am starting to run out of space. So as a temporary measure, maybe we can just leave this here. And I'll think of this when I have a little bit more time. Okay, so great signs and great scars. That's not actually that high for us, so we need 6 of the relevant memories. We're actually doing okay in terms of what would be required. So gossip, stolen secret, pattern. The question is, would I be willing to give up the other 3 required? And honestly, I don't think I am. I might be willing to try and read the relevant books, but the thing is, I don't think those books will be ready in time. I guess I could take a shot at it because, you know, I'm going to lose the elements of the soul anyway, but we can save it for the next day. It's not a big deal. Oop. What do you think? Disciplines of the Hammer? I don't need to listen to everything Reverend Timothy says. He doesn't even really expect me to, but I'm often glad when I do. I am pleasantly surprised by how many of these skills I've knocked down. So the ones that remain, we've got Tradisma Hyra, which I kind of believe... Well, no, hang on. I think we tried to flush Mohammed already, and that didn't turn out. But yeah, Tradisma Hyra, Auroral Contemplations, Inks of Containment, Glazier and Lightsmithing, Weaving and Knotworking, Purifications and Exaltations. And then today we're going to try Lockworks and Clockworks, Transformations and Liberations, and Insects and Nectars. That'll leave me 3 groups of 3, so 9 more skills. But in terms of what we've knocked down off the list, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 11 items. That's a pretty decent rate. Okay, so I'm going to grab Reverend Timothy again. He's not the worst generator for memories, but probably not everything that we need for great signs and great scars. So for that, I'm actually going to take a minute to write down what I need, so just give me a second here. Okay, so the good news here is that I've got 8 between Grail and Knock, and that's with using a Newman, but not relying on any of the weird stuff. So let's try and lock those in now. And if we get rain or fog, so much the better. So, Beguiling Melody, step 1. We should get that from Skeleton Songs. Gossip we should get from one of the Samuel Savage works. We'll do Humors of a Gentleman. I'm going to skip the Newman for now. The pattern can come from the book we just read. Salt, that would come from one of the kind of Bancroft to Wolf fanfics. Satisfaction, Fecry's Herbery, I think will do the trick there. I know these are my like usual go-tos, but I'm trying to do these reasonably quickly. Secret Threshold and Stolen Secret. So I think Almanac on Entrances gives us the Secret Threshold, but I want to double check that. It does. I thought that was one of Harry's books. It is. And then Stolen Secret is Gospel of Zacchaeus. How does he know all of this? It's because it's the only game I have been playing for the last couple of months. Although I can never remember. There we go. So obviously that's a minute that we'll be waiting on. Now, it did occur to me that I did create a small problem for myself. Excuse me. In that, if I want a Grail and a Knock to level that up, I'm either going to need to restore the Grail and the Knock of... actually, I don't think I had any Knock to use, but I'm going to have to restore Elements of the Soul, or I'm going to be down the Arab and the Shapt to do the experiments. So perhaps I will get those out of the way at the start. It wasn't quite what I was originally planning to do, but I've got Lockworks and Clockworks. Actually, Lockworks and Clockworks might be the only one that's affected by the Knock. Transformations and liberations and insects and nectars. Yeah, so technically it's only the shop that's affected, but we'll get the work done. I don't think this will be too time consuming, I'm hoping. At the very least, we've kind of learned some lessons from the last round that we tried. So yeah, in this case here, the very first thing I want to try is actually not Knock, but Sky. I think I'm going to try to make Ashertine. Really? Okay. Xanthotic Essence, then. Oh, hang on. That's only 14 Sky. I'm looking for my devotional hurricane lab. Still didn't do it. Okay. So I think it's fair to say the various essences are a no. I haven't tried Ichor-Auroral though, so let's give that a shot. Okay. And for some reason, Essential Periost is listed here as well. That's going to be a trickier one because I need to find something that will take a remnant, but looks like... God, how do I get this guy? Maybe. Oh, hang on, the Mazarine Fife. Not quite how I saw this going, but... No. Okay, no surprise there. Now the problem here is that I just don't really have that much. So I can try the Glassfinger Toxin on the odd chance, but I actually haven't really systematically gone through... It's like the thing is, Glassfinger Toxin doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you think about what Lockworks and Clockworks is. I would have been more inclined to think that this is a Sky lesson, except for the fact that I just tried all of the different Sky things. I guess I didn't try it with Ascendant Harmony and a Mazarine Fife. Well, no, it wouldn't. I guess it would have to be with the Mazarine Fife. Yeah, no. Okay. Would help if I actually put it in the right thing. Okay. Oh, you know what I haven't tried? I haven't tried putting this with Orichalcum. At least I haven't tried on my records. In fact, it's slightly weird that I don't have a note trying that, but let's go, because that would make Azoth, well, yeah, Azoth doesn't quite make sense either, but let's just get it off the list and then we can work out the next steps. Huh. Okay. Technically, for the sake of the argument, I'll add honey. What do you know? Adding honey to the clockworks and clockworks didn't do anything? So there's got to be a sky thing that I'm not figuring out here. Like, sky would be the most natural follow-up. The thing is that my knock is actually quite thin. So I can make a chronsicord, there's no question there. I suppose, like, there's the Azoth here. The problem is that this is like a higher level item, so I don't actually see this being an input to anything. Okay. I think it's pretty clear here that the when it comes to lockworks and clockworks, there's definitely more work to be done. Transformations and liberations. So that is Forge and Moth. It's like one trip to the dispensary and then one trip to the alchemy table. I wouldn't be too surprised. Yeah, we already did the skin shuck mead, so I think that trick's I think that trick has exhausted itself, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a transformation we haven't quite worked out yet. So the Earthquake name's really my best option for Forge. So I think we've already worked out a couple here, so if we put the the Xanthotic Essence turns into Iotic Essence turns into Orpiment Exultant. And Bitter Black Salts produces the Iotic Essence. I guess the question now would be, what are the other things that we can throw in here? So just, Ichor Vitreous has actually been doing some work for us lately, so let's find a way of getting 2 more Forge. Probably not the Armagnac. Maybe Honey Scar Jasmine? Okay. Oh, you know what? This might be a moth thing. What's my mothiest memory? Is it really Occult Scrap? 12 could be better. Moth Orchid? Doesn't really get me where I need, but I am going to be trying with honey, so I think that will give me a little moth. Actually, I think just normal honey only gives me 1. Sacre bleu! Ah, mothy flowers, where are you? Well, Moly doesn't count. You know what? We don't need to get clever. We can just go to a different range. Oh, maybe we can. Okay, so much for cooking. Okay, so again, one of my requirements here is to put the honey in place. And it can't be the cuckoo honey, it has to be the plain honey. I guess devotion and remembrance both work here. I've already used up the well, I should have a mothy friend though. Everyone knows that perilous imago makes the honey taste better. Unfortunately, that was not the trick. Oh, you know what? How much you want to bet it's this guy? I didn't even think about making a chimeric larva. Okay. God, this is going to be weird. Okay, so maybe insects and nectars? Oh, Jesus, how do I make this work with a... Okay, I can make a chimeric larva with an egg. I don't really have a memory I'm willing to give up yet. So where else do I find the 2 moon? Well, let's start with something simple. Let's actually get the egg. So we have a spare. Oh, I don't have a spare. What? I thought I had eggs coming out of my ears. it's a particularly large larva. What can I say? Okay, it'll do. Can we give it eigengrow? Not if I want it to work. I'd rather not lose... They can put tea leaves in. No, that can't... Oh, wait. Okay, yeah. I need to be looking for moon things, not just... Oh, you know what? This is going to seem so silly, but the mist-kissed water is exactly what I need. Pour it out. Yeah, so I think the problem that I have here is that I actually really do need... Oh, hang on. So before I commit this thing, I actually need to do the rest of the investigation. But yeah, so I think the problem here is that transformations and liberations, chances are it's a question of whether or not I can turn a chimeric larva into a perilous imago. I never even thought that I would want to have one of those kicking around so that I could make it grow up. So we're going to make another one, but because insects and nectars is on my to-do list, I actually want to deal with that first, especially because we have a lot more nectar than I normally would. So, and it also occurred to me that I want to make a wormwood dream at some point, but that's probably a tomorrow me problem. So let's work with what we've got. I can never remember which of these has moon. In fact, it probably would have been smarter for me to use a moon Newman, but I wanted to show you the bee. All right, what are we working with here? Well, okay, so we already know how to make the perilous imago. So let's take a look at our moon list. Not a whole lot to make me confident. Good lord, how would I even make sense of this? Maybe it's better for me to try the nectar side of things first. Looks like Hive's Lament's my best option. Okay, so we've got Maricat, which is made with Lethe. Oh, you know what? I probably don't have a nectar list. Oh, I do. Pyrus Oracle Calcinius. That actually seems like a good idea. So the one thing I will try is the wood first. Okay. I do have a note here for attempting a beverage, which we've already done, but I am going to try the honey. Both kinds. Oops. Okay. There's not a whole lot for me to work with here, so let's go to the kitchen range and see if I can make something happen. Instead, Hive's Lament still. Yeah, so there's a possibility we can get a Sacrament Malachite out of it. This. No! I'm just trying to think about... Oh, right, there aren't any moon. So I'd have to go down below here. I'm really just looking for something that I can add the Stimfling to, because I think the Stimfling is the one that gives you the Wormwood Dream. So I figure we combine those. Nope. Asmiel is the next possibility, although I can't... that, I think I need to go back to the Noctunary. I didn't exactly choose the easiest one for me to work out for the end of the night. Okay, so Asmiel, we're already at 17. That doesn't give us anything. Let's try that again, actually. I see. Okay. So under substances, Black Sapphire Wash is overkill, but that does do the trick. Huh. Okay. And I mean, there is technically the option of adding Solomon's Preparation that has worked for moon in the past, but there isn't quite, like, the thing is that when I do this sort of stuff, there's no real logic behind it, right? Insects and nectars, you would imagine, would have a lot more to do with, you know, the nectar stuff. Also, weirdly enough, Backed into Balance does not have a nectar side. Fair enough. Good lord. Okay, so it could be that there's a nectar or a moth thing I haven't considered here, or it could be that actually, you know what? This might be a lot simpler than I thought. How do I even think about this? I think I can make this work. So if it's insects and nectars, it may actually be that honey is the answer here. Oh, God. I just need to find a way to get the moth in. This might still work. It's really not that much moth. Okay. So all I need is to come up with 8 more moth. That's not a problem, right? Okay. So I can get that up to 9 with a... Yeah, okay, so if insects and nectars, if it's a moth thing I need to make, I don't have what it takes. I'm gonna have to think about this at another time. I am almost an hour past when I wanted to go to bed, so I think I'm going to leave this particular puzzle for not even Wednesday, because I do want to get going on making that chimeric larva. So I'm actually going to sort that out right now. Oh. But I'm actually feeling quite a bit better about my ability to get through most of these challenges. So I'm not going to lie, there has been a very strong temptation for me to consult well, you know, I probably wouldn't even look at a guide at this point. Like, you know, it's just as easy for me to go into the files. I mean, I don't know if there's an advantage one way or the other. I guess if I go into the files, I might see something I'm not supposed to. But then again, that's the risk with... Oh, the cracked TV. I'm sorry. I didn't notice you. How are you doing tonight? I suppose that's a risk that you run with the wiki either, as well. But yeah, so I think some of the moth stuff that I haven't been able to figure out can be attributed to not having a chimeric larva to level up, to transform. So we'll fix that with the ostrich egg. Now that's going to take 6 minutes, so that's basically the day spoken for in terms of insects and nectars. I can't expect to get any more. I can't expect to get any more materials out of that, or any more lessons out of that. And of course, actually, you know what? We'll take some time, especially because the cracked TV has joined us. Let's take the time to... You know what? I probably could have gotten by without using the miskissed water with the cloudy day. Anyways, that's fine. Reverend Timothy is always happy to chat. We do have a minute to get the memories that we need for Great Signs and Great Scars, but I think, yeah, we're probably going to have to leave it for another day to work out Lockworks and Clockworks transformations and liberations and insects and nectars. But again, the good news out of that is it's only 3 more days, and we've gone through the whole list. So the ones that remain are Inks of Power, Sky Stories, Spices and Savors, Stitchings and Bindings, Meniscate Reflections, Desires and Dissolutions, Pearl and Tide, Serpents and Venoms, and Furs and Feathers. And the hope here, there's a specific reason why I wanted to go from the most powerful to the least powerful. The most powerful, it's pretty straightforward to get to 15, so you can iterate over all of the different ingredients you think might work. Whereas once you get to the lower levels, you are sort of faced with this puzzle of trying to make everything fit together. And so one of the ways that this can work in your favor is that if you have a subset of things that you know will produce a level 15 or like a keeper level recipe, you can try those first, and you can do whatever you need. Get a Newman, get a a particularly powerful item to help you make that thing. And you don't have to use it, right? You just see whether or not it gives you the recipe. And if it does, that's another thing you can scratch off your list. But if you can't make the numbers work, well, that now gives you something to focus on moving forward. And that's kind of where we're going to get once we're sort of down to the dregs here. Arguably, you see this happening with insects and nectars, right? It's possible that there's something that I can, that I wanted to try and I just didn't. So like the moth, for instance, to make skin shuck mead. But, again, I'll do my best with what I've got. And then once we're down to that subset of skills where it's like, okay, there's something funny going on here, then we can sort of apply, reason. So I think Natalia Brulot mentioned the breaking of a window in Glazier and Lightsmithing, so that kind of lends itself to a few things. So you would probably imagine knock at that point in addition to the lantern and sky. Natalia Brulot is also associated with edge, so maybe you'd give that a shot as well. And admittedly, you're trying 4 different aspects as opposed to 2, but it's better than just trying every single combination for every single aspect. You can try that at the very end. But all of this is kind of this search to try and find a way of doing this in a sensible way. So the Skeleton Songs, poems of greedy delight, composed by the possibly pseudonymous Arbella Dusk, the rumored heiress turned madam turned poetess. In Arbella's introduction, she explains that the book was to be illustrated, but that the Suppression Bureau would not permit it. She hints that the illustration still exists somewhere. The book is dedicated to Sir Parzival of the Red Cup. The 26 delightful fruits, the 7 chastisements, the 9 gardens, the 4 regrets. The Humours of a Gentleman, Samuel Savage's satirical comedy on the intrigues of the ailing but cunning John's son, his mistress Mavelyn, her lover Leo, and the upstart Corvino. By the end of the first act, Mavelyn has revealed a secret door in the walls of the house to Leo, and Corvino has taken to consuming worms. The play is scabrous and occasionally hilarious. The characters are contrary and capricious. Many of the more resonant lines might well be formula of power disguised in plain sight. Up to the Regensburg room. Ogor Tisilik Ogor. A surprisingly chatty text by an entity that identifies itself as the Excellency Nathobasis. The Excellency Nathobasis explains that the limbs and extensions of potent and dangerous glyphic achievements. The sentences are nonsense on first reading, but quickly acquire an insistent meaning on each repetition. With adequate grail, the Excellency Nathobasis explains, the pale mommet wakes to life. With generous grail, the flushed mommet accepts our beneficence. It may be necessary to overcome scruple. The Excellency Nathobasis will assure you as to how and to whom and with which the most perfect instrument. So this kind of gives us an indication of what we're going to want to do with signs and scars when we get to it. A Pale Lady and a Prince of Wines, an anonymous biography of Ava de Wolf, last of the de Wolfs, focus rather salaciously on her personal troubles and intrigues. Ava de Wolf is engaged to one Abraham... This isn't a salt text, is it? Oh, it is. Okay. Ava de Wolf is engaged to one Abraham Wheellock, but he leaves her at the altar. Furious and humiliated, she returns to Brankrug and is not seen in London again. 3 days after her departure, Abraham Wheellock's body is washed up near Gravesend. His face is so badly pecked by birds that he is only identified by his belongings. These include a wax pouch containing a letter addressed to Wheellock, whose contents seem to show that he is a spy in the pay of the Austrians. Subsequent investigations suggest that the letter is a forgery, but the matter remains obscure. Lord Franklin Bancroft, sometimes called the Prince of Wines, begins a series of visits to Brankrug House. His relationship with Ava becomes a source of scandal. Ava is by now 49, but rumors persist for years of a DeWolf Bancroft heir. This is somewhat confirmed by Bancroft when he visits, by the way. Ava's biographer claims that before her drowning death, her child by Bancroft was adopted by her friends the Southies, that the child became the sister of the later poet laureate, Robert Southey. No real evidence is provided in support of this claim. Fekri's Herbery, the early wisdom of Eason Fekri, at that point a traveling healer, much later the secretary solvent of the Curia of the Isle. As a Skaptodon, Eason may consume only that which is found in the earth, so he's best with root lore. Eason identifies pale seaweed found on the beaches of Cornwall as a useful source of rose and winter aspect. His tone here is a little guilty, perhaps because he's showing an interest in sea produce. Excuse me. Which might be thought of as unwise for a Skaptodon, and perhaps because his proposal to name it Ava's Locks suggests a tiny crush on the pale lady of Brankrug. An Almanac of Entrances, a handbook of sealed and unsealed byways and shortcuts through the bounds, compiled by Willem Harries in the 1860s during his term as librarian of Hush House. Harries discusses the role played by the Legion de Soul and the Company of the Wolf in Gold in warding the bounds against outside influences. He warns that bounds travelers may themselves be considered outside influences. The Mansis as Ys lacks walls. Ys and the Mansis have both their gates, and there may be no gate without a wall. Thus the paradox resolves, as all those who walk in dream will learn. But the wood has neither gate nor wall, and so it is the wood whose roots may creep after us into the hours of our waking. And finally, the Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the Mansis through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life, in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. And there's our stolen secret. So we were doing this so that we could level up, at least get our first level of Great Signs and Great Scars. There's an argument to be made that I should try this a second time because, the Arab, the shop, I've got 3 different elements of the soul that I can use to level up Great Signs and Great Scars, at which point the question is, do I have, 7 elements of the soul to level, to read books, which I do. So I won't do this, I won't do this the whole way tonight, but I will at least queue it up. So we'll first of all shift the position. So Pyroglyphics goes here. Okay. Oh, I have one left over. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So I'll try and get a little more variety in the books, because that's basically where we're going to finish for tonight. But I'm still going to do the same batch. Batch of memories, that is. Okay, so Beguiling Melody comes from the Morphe Codex, and I'll be honest, it's been a while since I have read that. Now, I gotta be careful too, so let's leave the Shapt aside. This is gonna be the Shapt that I use to level up Signs and Scars. Everything else is fair game. Although I guess I could use the Whist here as well. That doesn't matter. Okay, so Morphe Codex. I would have thought it was up here, but... Alright, we'll start from the base and work our way up. Okay, it might actually be in here. So these were Tantras. So if the Morphe Codex was from someone who did more than one work, it would fit in here. Huh. We've got the Larkabine Codex, so maybe I don't have the Morphe Codex. Oh no, hang on. It's because it talks about the Thunderskin. That's why I couldn't find it. Appropriate that we have the heart, or core working on it, though. Okay, after that fun, we've only got only have 7 more memories to get. So gossip. I'd kind of like to read Three Flowers Hath the Tree again. So I'm wondering if I put that up with the Calyptra books, which it should be. It doesn't seem to be the case. Now that makes me wonder if I don't have Three Flowers Hath the Tree. I probably do. And there was another reason why I didn't put it there, so... These are Wars of the Roses. Can't be that hard to find this one. It's a pretty unique name. Oh, actually, I wonder if it would be down in the... Yeah. Nope, From History to Eternity. Okay. This is Origins of Hours? Yeah. Apparently I don't know my own filing. Oh, hang on. Right, it's because it's by Ernestine Peterhans. That's why I didn't file it. Because it's not really... Okay, pattern. Okay, I am kind of curious. Apparently I have the Grand Passage of the Hours. Maybe that's a new one I got? I'm not gonna lie. This one's not familiar to me, and I am a little suspicious. I think I'm gonna skip over that and get a different pattern. Okay, I have a couple of choices here. Road to Janus seems interesting, though. I don't even remember what desk I was on. We can do this. Turns out I do have it. It is a... It's a VAC text, but... Alright. I chose a really weird way to sign off, because I was going late. But I don't know, it's like there's a bunch of books where I remember their location and their text very easily, and so I overread them, and I would kind of like to get some variety. I don't know, like it was kind of fun to do the theme of Henry on the anniversary of his jousting accident, so I figure that's kind of a neat way to go through the library, and in this case it'll give me something new to read on Wednesday. Okay, so I was on to Salt. Let's do Larkabine Codex, because I was talking about the Morphe Codex before. Satisfaction. I'm slightly inclined to try calcite supplications, and I'm not sure why, but I don't feel like I need a reason at this point. I think I just need to get them locked in. We have a secret threshold already, so the last is a stolen secret. So let's try an investigation of a founded country, which, if I recall correctly, is a phonograph. Yep. Okay, so that gets me ready to go. So the plan for Wednesday will be, the main focus here is to level up Great Signs and Great Scars. We've got another book in the library. All of that's great. But at this point, you know, the focus really is on getting those last few skills taken care of. So probably what'll happen, so we'll finish leveling up Great Signs and Great Scars. I will probably take another crack at Lockworks and Clockworks, because I'm hoping that I will be a little bit more rested and coherent. I think the plan will be, to be honest, tomorrow I'll just take it easy. I will probably not even just go to bed early, but like I just won't do any of the stuff that I had originally had planned. And then from there, yeah, I would ideally, so actually taking a look at the pace at which I got things done, we took 1, 2, 3, well, I think there is a reasonable argument to be made. If I avoid getting too chatty, I think there's a very reasonable argument to be made that I will complete all of the skills on the first pass. What that will do is that will give me a couple of spreadsheets of recipes that I haven't tried yet. I will also have the chimeric larva to do some of the moth stuff on. And then, of course, I think it's pretty clear that there are going to be a couple of skills that I can't make any sense of in terms of like what to get the last recipe out of. But I think it's a lot nicer to be working with a subset of 3 or 4 skills that I can really spend some time sort of thinking about and trying to figure out, as opposed to just imagining that, like right now, if I've got 4 groups of 3, that's 12 skills where I'm like, I don't even know what I'm gonna try and do with these. So insects and nectars, I think there's a possibility that there might be something with the chimeric larva, maybe. Or honey. Inks of Power, I think, will be... I'm just taking a look at the list here. So Inks of Power will probably be a tough one. Sky Stories might actually give me a Porphyrine. Spices and Savors, I'm not too sure about. Stitching and Binding, Meniscate Reflections, Desires and Dissolution. Desires and Dissolution strikes me as one that probably were affected by the Momets. Pearl and Tide, Serpents and Valiums, Furs and Feathers. I mean, most of these don't seem too mysterious. It's like Furs and Feathers has a couple of counterintuitive ones, but it does have the sky right there. So, anyways, something for me to think about when I am a little more put together. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to try and keep my wits about me a little bit more in future streams. I don't know if you're still around the Crack TV, but I'm sorry you kind of came in at the end there. Hopefully this wasn't too dull. But for those of you who are enjoying Book of Hours, we will be playing it through to the end. I will commit the history as soon as the next Numa comes by. But as you can see, there has been, obviously I've got a way to go. I've been working on trying to, make some progress while also understanding the full game. Once we've sorted out all of the, the lessons or all of the skills, I might consider forcing Numa. But there's still things for me to investigate in Book of Hours, so it's not too upsetting to me to give this a try. Now, a streamer I am very fond of, there's nobody doing Book of Hours, but there is a streamer who I'm very fond of who is streaming, and I don't know how much later she's going to be going on, but I always like the chance to host her. And I happen to know that I think she would like, if she can, to make a living doing this. Now, that's not, she's not going to quit her job tomorrow, but Prosciutto Fist is a very friendly broadcaster playing Traveler's Rest, which is actually a neat one. It's kind of like a fantasy Stardew Valley. But I actually really enjoy sort of just interacting with her. Pro's got a bit of a... so her background's in forestry, which my university actually had a big program on. But it's kind of fun. Like, if you catch Prosciutto Fist, first of all, it's also a great name, but on a good night and talk about something you're interested in, I tend to find that she has sort of hidden depths in terms of topics of conversation, which is one thing I really like highlighting amongst this group, because there's obviously a lot of people with lots of different talents and interests. So I always feel, in good hands whenever I host that. And on top of that, I have been enjoying her play through Baldur's Gate 3. So I feel like those are some very good reasons to host Pro. And thank you very much, Abyss, etc. I'll try to be on the ball for Wednesday. Anyways, have a good night, everybody. Enjoy Pro. Talk to you later.